well, and to members and to the public upstairs. If you're getting warm, I will probably do this with people that got jackets. Please feel free to remove them if you're getting hot within that. The officers today are Russell
Sorry,
Chick.
Chair, could I just ask you that you point out what sort of meeting this is today? You haven't even said what sort of meeting it is. Thank you.
Thank you. Welcome to the Planning Committee, Tuesday, the 24th of August, 2021. The officers presiding today are Russell Chick, Planning Team Leader, Olive Bolter, Strategic Manager, Planning and Infrastructure, Alan Ransom, there, our Highways Representative, Highland Roads, Ben Gard, Legal Advisor, Marie Bartlett, Committee Clerk, and also welcome Paul Fuller, who's a Cabinet Member for Planning and Housing. There are no planned fire drills during this meeting. If you hear the fire alarm sound, please treat it as a real emergency and evacuate the building via the nearest safe escape route. The nearest escape route is via the signposted set of stairs to your left as you leave the council chamber or public gallery, and exit via the door to the back of the building, walk across the inner car park, round the building to the evacuation point, which is the pavement opposite to the police station. The lifts can't be used in the event of an emergency. Please don't re-enter the building until you're advised it's safe to do so by a council member or staff. I do request mobile phones are switched off or on mute. I request that all speakers use the microphones. You'll see you just press the button in front of you. I request that no food is consumed during the meeting unless it's for medical need. And I'll remind members that they cannot leave the council chamber during the presentation or debate on an application. If they leave, they will be unable to vote on that application. Remind members of the public that they are present purely to observe the process, or if you are an applicant or objector, then obviously you'll be given your duration of time to speak. Just for your benefit, I'll run through the lighting system. You'll see up there a traffic light system of red, amber, green. When you are asked to speak, you will see the green light will display. And when you have 30 seconds left, the amber light will display. And when the red light displays, I will stop you talking. You hear that sound? This is to ensure that all parties receive the same amount of time and that the process is seen to be fair. Thank you. I will now move to the agenda. Yes, sorry for you. Councillor Jarman, you asked for a point of order.
The committee will be aware that the Isle of Wight Council has received representations and solicitors' letters giving notice of impending legal action, including judicial review, involving the minutes and matters of the last meeting of this committee. The existence of at least one of those letters has been confirmed in emails to external parties by the Isle of Wight Council legal staff. A copy of the said letter has been shared and widely reported in the media following multiple commentaries from, at the last count, 35 comments and actually hundreds of votes from Isle of Wight residents. The matter has also attracted very public commentary from members of this committee, including challenging, perhaps defamatory remarks about other committee members. and attributed quotations from committee members have appeared on the White and the county press. It is clear that legal process is underway, that being an item under point of order, and any effective finding of fact by discussing or voting on the minutes would be, I believe, reckless and potentially undermine the work of this committee, its members, and the Isle of Wight Council. At the very least, it would likely protract the legal process, generate unnecessary and distracting discourse, and incur costs. Given the matter is now sub judice and legal representations have been made, it would clearly be inappropriate and potentially dangerous to go behind that legal process, and I therefore propose by motion that we defer consideration of the minutes and matters therein until the conclusion of those judicial proceedings.
I'm just going to take a reference for legal advice. I'm asking Ben Guards to give advice within that. You said a motion. Is there a second to that? Or?
If I can give advice first, Chairman, before we give any...
Chair, another point of order.
Yeah.
It's sad that we're going to have to go down this road, but I do not believe that under a point of order a motion can be made regarding a different item on the agenda. I would seek Mr. Guard's view on that. This is not a point of order. This is an attempt to move a motion regarding item 1 on the agenda this afternoon, and therefore I would ask that that is ruled out of order. Thank you.
Sorry, can we have a speaker?
If I can address the first point, I take Councillor Brodie's point and I'll look into the matter of the point of order. I was unclear in my mind on the point of order that was actually being made as it was made, but in any event, my advice to committee is this. The council is in receipt of an initial letter from concerned residents on the matter of the item that was discussed at the last planning committee. That is not a pre-action protocol letter under the civil procedure rules. And as a result, it's not accurate to say that legal proceedings have commenced. Far from it. In fact, that's not, even if there were a pre-action letter, one could say that there was no proceedings that have properly commenced. And so that point isn't accurate. But notwithstanding that point, the time limit from which a planning judicial review can be brought is the issue of the planning permission itself. And so that cannot be done until you have resolved here with the minutes, issued the planning permission, and then at that point, the time limit to bring a judicial review commences. If this committee were in a point where it resolved not to grant planning permission, not to approve the minutes until the legal challenge had been resolved, that would, I think, defeat itself to a certain extent. So I consider that there's no need to defer the minutes pending the outcome of the legal proceedings. And that would be my advice to members, is that the minutes themselves are not a absolute and final thing. They can in themselves be challenged at court, and so if they are inaccurate, that is a point which a complainant could bring to could bring forward as part of their challenge, and that can legitimately form part of it. Chairman, Councillor Brody's got a point.
Sorry.
Another point of order, and I signalled you weren't looking this way. Can I just make another point of order? You have indicated in writing today, previously to today, to me and to the monitoring officer, that you will take no part in consideration of the minutes of the previous planning committee, that you would excuse yourself from the meeting. Therefore, I challenge your right to be able to make any decision regarding points of order from Councillor Jarman at this meeting, and therefore I request that you leave the room and allow me to take over as the Vice Chairman of the Planning Committee. Thank you.
Well, firstly, Councillor Brodie, I was just about to actually communicate that, but I wanted to make actual reference to Ben Guard first in regard that, because I was very well aware that obviously, as the chair that was the ward councillor involved in the connected to the previous meeting, I do accept that there's a conflict of interest and that I would need to go. Was not aware of this being brought forward, so you have to accept that I need to just take reference with the legal officer and regard that. Thank you.
If I could make a very quick point of order, Chairman. In relation to the point that Councillor Jarman raised and which Ben replied to, I think, to my mind, this isn't an issue about whether there's a JR, whether there are legal proceedings. It's a question about the appearance of the committee and our responsibility under the Planning Committee Constitution to ensure that bias not only doesn't take place per se, but isn't an appearance of bias. And I think we have seen in the course of 3 publications of different minutes of questions where the chief executive, where the legal officer, where the monitoring officer have been taking legal advice, that there is certainly a question that is being raised in relation to what happened in those minutes and the issue of acquiescence and assent. And I think on that basis, it should be determined, and I would appreciate Mr. Guard is looking at it potentially from the perspective of a JR, but I think it's a wider issue. It's a much broader question. Are we as a committee in our duty to the public and the way that that is perceived, given everything that's happened? I mean, today I've seen a slew of emails going back and forth. I don't necessarily know whether I even agree with some of the points made, but the issue which is substantive is there a question about this in terms of maybe determination from the legal officer, from the chief exec, from whoever the vice chair is, whether it's Mr. Brodie, Councillor Brodie or others. And for that reason, I think we should perhaps pause, maybe perhaps Mr. Guard would look at it from that wider view.
Chairman, I am in a position to advise further on this. I'll just pause at this moment in case you were minded to excuse yourself from hearing that before I give my advice. So if I pause so that you can make your decision as to whether or not you should be in the room first, and then I'll be in a position to give advice once you've settled that point. I will consider the position briefly while you do that.
Councillor Adams.
From what I've seen, I haven't seen anything in the Constitution that actually tells us in law that Councillor Lilly can't chair this meeting. It's we're only discussing the minutes. I've seen nothing that says Councillor Lilly can't chair this meeting. And could you show us something now that would prove to me and to the other councillors that we have to exclude Councillor Lilly from the rest of this meeting? Because as it stands, we have 2 constitutions flying about. The 2 constitutions are different. They contradict each other.
Can I stop?
So let's see the proof.
Can I just stop you there? I think it's because we are moving into the particular issues or the issues regarding the minutes of the last meeting, I am going to actually stand down and excuse myself, because it is extremely important that the integrity of this planning committee stands, the right word, and I have been given advice by the monitoring officer very clearly that because I opposed the previous application, which the minutes are in reference to, and I am continuing in supporting my residents in that regard. I don't think it is suitable for me to go. I was going to go when the actual item of the minutes were called. So at this moment in time, I will withdraw from this room and I'll come back after the minutes.
Sorry, Councillor Ellicott, before you go, can I just clarify that you're leaving of your own volition and that you're not being forced out by the monitoring officer, as you claimed in regard to the last planning committee to the local media? And I have a copy if you would like to check.
I am not going to answer that, Councillor Bowley. I'm going to leave this meeting, give you the opportunity to come forward. If you want to ask the questions later in the meeting and amend the questions, then fine.
So the answer you gave me at the briefing for this meeting yesterday, you're not prepared to repeat here, where you said very clearly you're excusing yourself of your own volition.
Obviously, the fact that I am independently getting up actually is evidence of that. Thank you.
Here we have a very example of the problem with that planning meeting. We've now excluded a gentleman and councillor that by his own volition said he was predetermined, and in my opinion he's done the right thing in every circumstance. We're now going to put a person in the chair which has caused all this friction, and we're going to give him the casting vote on the very issue we're talking about. That raises very serious concerns for me.
Excuse me, can you stop? There's no chair in here. I'm Vice Chairman of the Planning Committee. And firstly, I would ask Councillor Adams to withdraw the remarks. It's just regarding the way in which the last Planning Committee was conducted. Therefore, I would ask you to leave the meeting, please, Councillor Adams. I adjourn the meeting, therefore, until you leave. Thank you.
Chair.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we'll recommence, having taken various advice from staff and legal officers. Firstly, just to deal with Councillor Adams, he made remarks regarding the last planning committee, which are untrue, false, and I consider, well, frankly, insulting. Just because he didn't get his own way like a child, in my view. Excuse me, will you shut up? Therefore, I would like to propose to this committee that Councillor Adams be no further heard at this meeting, and I seek a seconder for that proposal. Okay, in which case Councillor Adams will be heard. However, it will not be the end of the matter. We will then move on. We then had a point of order and a motion from Councillor Jarman. Sorry, Councillor Churchman.
I wasn't present at the last planning meeting because, like Councillor Lilly, I had always objected to that particular planning application, in which case, should I also leave the room? Because obviously I can't vote anyway, but as I said, as Councillor Lilly has left, should I also depart?
Another brief adjournment so that Councillor Churchman can be advised by the legal officer. I'll restart the meeting. Councillor Downer.
I do apologise, Chair. Could I ask Mr. Gard to give me the same advice because I was not present? And I do apologise for making him walk round twice.
All right. I adjourn again. Remember this. The child. Okay, we'll restart the meeting again. Has everybody got the advice they require? Thank you. Okay, where we were, we had a point of order from Councillor Jarman and a motion so long ago now, effectively that we should not be dealing with the minutes of this meeting, of the previous meeting. That was formally seconded. What I suggest as the chair is that we move on to the minutes of the previous meeting, where we can have a proposal either to accept that the minutes are a true record of the meeting held on the 27th of July, and then members can either vote in favour of that or not. That's my decision from the chair. Therefore, I will formally propose from the chair that the minutes of the meeting that you've had circulated, held on the 27th of July, are a true record of that meeting. Can I have a seconder, please? Thank you, Councillor Quirk.
Just come back on this point.
Well, that's very true.
Do you want me to come in on this point or want to just speak it?
Yes, yes, by all means, yes, yeah. Sorry, Mr. Gard, I just want to say one other thing. But we now have, just for clarity, we have a proposal to accept the minutes as a true record, formally proposed by myself, Councillor Brodie, seconded by Councillor Quirk. Councillor Quirk has just asked that there is clarity for every member, he knows, I'm sure, which set of minutes we're talking about, because I've heard that there were 3, I've actually only ever seen 2, but there we go. Mr. Gard.
Thank you, Chairman. On the point of order raised by Councillor Jarman, I read from the part 4B of the Constitution here, which is the part that provides the procedure rules for this and other committees. And on page 118 of the Constitution, there it says a member may raise a point of order at any time. The chairman will hear them immediately. A point of order may only, and that's my emphasis, only relate to an alleged breach of these procedure rules or the law. The member must indicate the rule or point of law and the way in which they consider it has been broken. The ruling of the chairman on the matter will be final. I, Chairman, have heard nothing which indicates to me that there is a breach of these procedure rules or indeed law on the approval of the minutes. And on that basis, my advice to you is that that's not a valid motion.
Okay.
Legal experience regarding that specific point, and then I'll come back.
Well, I wouldn't necessarily go that far, but what I would want to question, in relation to the point you've raised, would the conduct of a member of this committee be a relevant issue of law if there is potentially an outstanding code of conduct referral? Would that engage the provision you've referred to?
I don't believe it would, through the chair. Sorry, Chair. I don't believe it would, because that's a matter for separate remit. The matter for conduct of a councillor is one to be reported to the monitoring officer and subject to separate statutory provision. In this case, I believe what the point of order refers to is a clear breach of the rules of the Constitution or something that prevents you from approving the minutes. And in this case, I see no reason why the minutes cannot be discussed by this committee. And on that point, if I can, Chairman, as we move forward, I just want to read from Rule 2 of Part 4B of the Constitution, which refers to minutes, and that says that the minutes will contain all motions and amendments in the exact form and order the chairman put them, unless a motion is approved without amendment, in which case it will only appear as a resolution. The chairman will move that the minutes of the previous meeting be signed as a correct record. The only part of the minutes that can be discussed is their accuracy, and that, I believe, is the point that we're at. What we're looking to achieve on item 1 of this agenda is to confirm as an accurate record the minutes of the last meeting. And once those minutes are confirmed by this committee, as I've said in earlier advice, that although that is the point at which they're confirmed by the committee, that does not prevent their examination by a court at a later date if they are proved to be inaccurate. In this case, we have both a Microsoft Teams recording of the meeting and an audio recording of the meeting, which will both be definitive about what happened or not, and or form the basis of the minutes that were produced for consideration by this committee. And at that point, Chairman, unless I can be of any further assistance, I rest.
Thank you very much, Mr. Guard. Okay. Councillor Jarman, again.
Yes, the point of law is very clear that we are going behind what is inevitably a legal process for which notice has already been given. Whilst that legal process may not have gone very far formally, any consideration we give to that has a high probability of undermining it, undermining the credibility of this committee and indeed of the council, and of taking us into a railroad of costs. I strongly object to that. Also under the Constitution with a point of order. That point of order must be dealt with by the chair first, and only on its conclusion does the committee move on. So I'm asking the chair now to make a ruling on the point of order, whether he will accept the point of order and the motion duly made and duly seconded, and put that motion, as I said, duly seconded now to the vote.
Councillor Jarman, I believe that you exaggerate the position regarding the decision of the 27th of July, and I reject your proposal. We'll move on.
Thank you, Chair. Given that I consider the meeting to be out of order and the matter to be subject to legal review and process, I must decline to continue in this meeting. I believe it out of order and I declare it so. Thank you.
Okay. We move on then. Agenda item 1, the minutes, as we already had proposed by me as the chair. Yeah. Okay, Councillor Adams.
Well, just to confirm, it's the second set of minutes, Chairman, so it's the outstanding point, yeah, it's the second set that published on Friday.
Anybody else? Yeah. Councillor Beston.
Thank you, Chairman. Possibly through Mr. Guard. So just for clarity, for committee members that weren't present at the last committee meeting, and for members that weren't present on the site visit, but for members that should so wish to vote if they feel they can. As a member that viewed the meeting virtually from start to finish, are those particular members, such as me, be required or allowed to vote?
Yes, Councillor Beston, there's no requirement for you to be present at a previous meeting for you to vote on the accuracy of the minutes as presented to you. As I said, we're simply looking at the accuracy of the minutes as reported to this meeting, as prepared by my Democratic Services colleagues on the basis of the audio recordings, the audio and the Teams recording that were available to it.
Okay, and I had that confirmed to me by the monitoring officer separately. Okay, Councillor Price.
Thank you, Chairman. I think this issue really comes down to the extension of the meeting after the initial meeting time expired. I wasn't present at that part of the meeting, so I was intending to just abstain anyway on this vote, just because I wasn't here. I have heard it online, and I think the determination is really whether members were aware that the meeting was going to continue or not. There wasn't actually a vote taken, which is unusual. I don't remember that ever happening before, but I guess it's a case of, did the members there present realise that the meeting was continuing and therefore continued to be involved in that meeting because they were present? I wasn't here, so I can't say. And that is, I think, where some of us may be having an issue with voting on these minutes, because I don't think it's clear exactly on that element whether we're agreeing with the minutes under the proviso that the members that were present understood that the meeting was continuing in a official capacity, or whether the meeting should not have continued because a vote wasn't taken. I don't think that's the case. I think it's more a case of whether the members present understood that the meeting was continuing past the allotted time. And I think that's really, when it comes to agreeing the minutes, I voted for many set minutes that I haven't been at a meeting all the way through. And I would normally vote on the minutes. I was intending not to because I wasn't here for the whole meeting, so I couldn't say for certain, not being in this room, that it was agreed that the meeting would continue. Could I just have a bit of advice on that? Because it's that element of it that I'm uncomfortable with, okay?
Well, I'll ask Mr. Gard to comment, but I would say, Councillor Price, I have been, in my many years on this council, in many meetings where a chair of a meeting will ask if there's agreement to have an extension, and it will be done by affirmation rather than people sticking their hands up. I do not believe that any member of the planning committee on the 27th of July did not realise that the meeting had been extended for up to half an hour, and every member engaged in the rest of the meeting. I'd be worried if they didn't realise, as an elected member, that the meeting had been extended. In fact, I would be worried about their fitness to be an elected member, to be frank, because it was so clear as far as I was concerned. I think you would have to ask everybody who was here, and most of them are here, who were there at that meeting. They fully participated, and you find well what was happening. Nobody challenged the affirmation of continuing the meeting. Everybody realised a decision needed to be made. And in my view, in my very clear view, this attempt to imply that the meeting was not officially extended is, as I've said to Councillor Adams, it's just childish bad loser. The bottom line is I would be the most popular councillor on the island if I had voted for the refusal on the casting vote. I didn't, because I'm not a coward. I voted correctly, in my view, on planning grounds, not because of public pressure. Thank you. Mr. Gard.
Thank you, Chairman. You almost took the words out of my mouth just for some reassurance to Councillor Price. It's perfectly proper in law for motions to be carried by affirmation. And in this case, it does not invalidate what has occurred since that time. And the Council will be very, very clear on that. It was for a point of order to be raised on the night under a breach of the procedure rules, if councillors thought that the procedure rules were not being followed, and no councillor raised that on the night as a point of order, much like we've had this morning this evening, when I talked about councillors being able to raise points of order based on a breach of the procedure rules. No councillor did, and on that basis, it does not invalidate what occurred afterwards. And in any event, what the council says, and having reviewed the papers, the monitoring officer has taken the view that the extension of time was affirmed by the committee, and that is what the minutes now reflect: is that that was extended and that resolution was carried on that basis.
Councillor Quirk.
I was at the meeting. I was very clear that the meeting had been extended. I was quite ready to put my hand up and second the motion, but it wasn't required because it went through by affirmation. I can't believe that any other member who was present didn't understand that the meeting was continuing because everyone stayed for it. So I think trying to rewrite the history is spurious, and we should go with the facts. And I think that the only issue was the original minutes said proposed and seconded. It could have been, but it wasn't. And I think that the minutes that we approve just need to say was agreed by affirmation. And if we do that, I think there will be an accurate record of the meeting.
And it does say that in version 2. I've never seen a third version. Version 2, which was sent out by Ms. Bartlett on Friday of last week, and I think everybody's had a copy of that. Okay.
One point of clarity, if I can.
Mr. Gard.
Sorry, Chairman. It's been quite a lot today already. For clarity, I've just had confirmation from Democratic Services colleagues that actually the motion was seconded by Councillor Brading. It was just the act of it not being voted And so it was carried through by affirmation on the basis of a proposal with a seconder and affirmation by the committee.
Thank you. Councillor Oliver.
Chair, am I correct in saying that a vote on that stance doesn't need to be by a show of hands? It can be just by straight affirmation.
Yes, in the
Just
Constitution, that is. Essentially, Councillor Oliver, if there was any objection, you would indicate so and a vote would be had. There was no objection. Before I bring in Councillor Drew, I'm just going to bring in the Cabinet member who would like to speak. Councillor Fuller.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Listening to the debate, listening to what members are saying, and particularly listening to what our legal officers are saying, I am in full support of the Chairman on this matter, and I want it to be underlined that I do that. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Drew.
Thank you, Chair. I wanted to address what you said, Councillor Brodie. I think, to my mind, this isn't a question of the accuracy of the minutes. I think this is a question about the appearance of this planning committee and the issue of bias.
Excuse me, Councillor Drew, I'm going to stop you there. The only issue here is about the truth and accuracy of those minutes. That is the only thing that counts in regard to any discussion about the minutes. It's not about how it appears, no matter what you may think. This is not about appearance. This is not about revisiting the decision that was made that day. Are those minutes an accurate account of what happened at the last planning committee? I have proposed that they are. Councillor Quirk has seconded. If you think they are inaccurate, then you should speak regarding the inaccuracies, not your view or how anybody else may see.
You're making an artificial distinction, Councillor Brodie. This isn't an issue that we're going to ventilate.
Excuse me, Councillor Drew, I've made my decision regarding that. You are very welcome to speak about the accuracy, but nothing else. Any other member? Okay, I'm going to put it to the vote then. So the proposal before you is that item 1 on your agenda, the proposal is to confirm as a true record the minutes of the meeting of the Planning Committee held on the 27th of July 2021. All those in favour, please show. All those against? Abstentions? Therefore, the minutes are approved. Thank you very much. We can now get the chairman back in. Sorry? Yeah, a brief adjournment to get the chairman back in. Okay, thanks everyone.
Okay, we will reconvene to the agenda. We're on to item 3, public question time.
Declarations of interest.
Unusual evening. Declarations of interest. Thank you, Councillor Crook.
Declaration of interest, non-pecuniary. I do know DN Associates. I contracted them to do some work about 5 years ago.
Thank you. Any other declaration of interest? Fuller.
Thank you, Chairman. Just a declaration of interest in the second item on the agenda, at Northwood. I am a Northwood Parish Councillor. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Others? Okay, can we go to item 3, public question time? Have we received any? Nope. Is there any up there? No. Sorry, item 4 on the agenda, which is the report of the strategic manager for planning and infrastructure planning applications. We have 2 planning applications to this evening. 3 because two we got 2 for the price of 1, sort of in there. So we've got 2 application. The first application that we're dealing with tonight is 19-01415-out, which is land west of 40 to 48 and 37 to 47 Broadwood Lane, 17 to 24 Forest Hills, and 2 to 20 and 2836 Arthur Moody Drive, Carisbrook, which is outlined for residential development comprising 113 dwellings, access for Arthur Moody Drive, roads, footways, landscaping, open space and upgrading a footpath, N15 to allow shared pedestrian cycle, updated ecological information, archaeological investigation. And then we are dealing at the same time with application 19-01426-4, which is land west to 40 to 48 and 37 to 47 Broadway Lane, and 17 and 24 Forest Hill, 2 to 20 and 28 to 36 Arthur Moody Drive, Carisbrook. Proposed 2 detached house with garage, 17 pairs of semi-detached houses, 36 dwellings in total with access from Forest Hills. If we can go to, sorry, Councillor Brodie.
Yeah, I've got a point of order, Councillor Lilly. In a recent post-election media survey of all Isle of Wight councillor, you, the chair of the planning committee, stated that one of your priorities for the next 4 years was stopping large developments on greenfield sites in your ward and other parts of the island. Given this clearly predetermined position and your withdrawal from consideration of the recent Westridge Farm greenfield application, and the fact that tonight we have another greenfield application in Gunville, Newport, do you as the chair feel that you are in a position to take part in the determination of the Gunville application this evening? Do you not, by participating in such greenfield applications, put at risk the council's ability to defend any refusal decisions? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Brodie. As you know, and also the monitoring officer knows, that I replied to your question in writing, which was previously. And I will, for members' reference, I actually referred to the Department of Communities and Government a letter on the their website about predetermination, bias and advice from monitoring officers. And you were sent a copy, and I do have copies here with Marie that members can have a copy of this with future. It clearly, section 25 of the Localism Act clarifies that council is not to be regarded as being unable to act fairly or without bias if they participate in a decision on a matter simply because they have previously expressed a view or campaigned on it. The effect is that councillors may campaign and represent their constituents, which I did in relation to Westacre Park, and then speak and vote on these issues without fear of breaking the rules of predetermination. I have been on planning over the last 4 years, and I have got a record of being fair in my judgment and making rational decisions on the evidence presented within that. And as a chair of many things on the Isle of Wight and nationally and internationally, I have always been fair and open-minded. So I do not see an issue. Let's move on. Thank you, Councillor.
Chair, just to say I accept that you corresponded with me privately. I do think that these sorts of things should be on the public record, and I hope that that would be minuted extensively, Councillor Lilly's position. Thank you.
Absolutely, and if the press want a copy of the Brandon Lewis letter from the Department of Communities and Local Government, I'm happy to give them a copy. Thank you. Let's move on. Sorry about the delay. Let's get on. It's your opportunity now to get your views across. The first speaker that we have is Sue Cook. Sorry. Oh, I've got to do the presentation first. I apologise to everyone. I've been a little bit overwhelmed by the thing and with some of the questioning, so I apologise. I'm only human. Russell, can you pass over?
Thank you very much, Chairman. Good evening, councillors. So the first item on the agenda, as the Chairman has said, involves 2 planning applications, one for outline permission and one for full, on the same site, which is outlined in red on the PowerPoint slide in front of you. Just occasionally, the application site is to the west of Gunville. This plan looks like it's to the north, but it has been rotated. So it is to the west of Gunville. The application site would be accessed via Broadwood Lane, which runs up through here, into Arthur Moody Drive and Forest Hills. So the site is within a rural area on the edge of town. Next to the site to the north is a development site known as Ash Lane, where some housing is already being built. And the same to the south, land at Alvington Manor View, where some housing is being built there. And members would have seen that during the site visit. To the west of the site is footpath 151, which members again would have seen on the site. And we'll move on to the next slides. So 2 aerial photographs then of the application site. It's formed of 2 fields with a large hedge through the middle. And there are existing properties alongside the eastern boundary within Broadwood Lane. Again, councillors would have seen that during the site visit. This slide helpfully shows the location of the Ash Lane development. As you can see, they're just getting out of the ground in this slide. You would have seen on the site visit that some of those houses are nearing completion now and some are occupied. And just a wider aerial shot then showing the application site and where it lies in relation to Gunville. Gunville Road is up through here, just at this point, and there's a small trading park to the southeast of the application site on the other side of Gunville Road. Just some photographs of the site then, just showing the application site to the north, looking towards Parkhurst Forest, and then to the south, looking towards the Area B to the south of Carrowsbrook, there, and you can just see some of the existing bungalows that align that section of the application site. And then showing the design and appearance of some of the properties in the locality. They date from the 1970s and 1980s. Similar appearance, many of them, a mix of two-storey, simple design properties and also bungalows alongside them. Moving into the site plans then, the area outlined in red here, which is coloured in, is the planning application that seeks full consent, and that is for 36 dwellings arranged around areas of open space. In the bottom part of the slide, you can see there what are dry ponds. They would be used for drainage during high periods of rainfall. Dissecting the site here is a large hedge, which councillors will have seen on site. That is to be largely retained. Then a proposed area of open space through here, with the houses either side. Again, to the east of the site, you can see the existing properties, which are in and around Broadwood Lane and Arthur Moody Drive. And the proposed access point for the full application would be from this section here, where the road effectively would be extended into the application site with pavements either side measuring 2 metres in width. For the outline application, that would have the remaining 113 houses. An application is in outline with means of access and landscaping to be considered. In relation to access, members, you will see the proposed roads throughout the site. Some of those roads would include a larger pavement, which would be a shared access route, 3 metres wide, and that would allow for both walkers and cyclists to use that section, and that would connect to footpath 151, which itself would be upgraded to a solid surface, again 3 metres wide, to connect to the rights-of-way network to the north, and a potential cycle track off to the southwest of the site, which would link Newport to Freshwater and beyond. Just a slightly enhanced version of the northern side of the full application. You can see there that the properties are arranged as pairs and detached properties. This would be the open space with parking areas for each of the properties to the front, with front gardens set back from these proposed roads. Then moving on to the southern part of the full application, these are the dry ponds that I was talking about earlier on. They would be used to capture rainfall in high storm events. There would be a lot of rainfall. They would hold water and then it would be released at an agreed rate to prevent flooding beyond the site. And then you've got the proposed housing to the west of that. I'll just flick through some of the proposed designs. The plans are marked up with the various design types for the housing. They can be seen as arranged throughout the full application. And this is some of the design types, pretty typical townhouses for the site, mainly semi-detached with gabled roofs, but there are some detached ones as well. And I should say also that would be a mix of 3 and 4 bed properties. And this is an example of how the application site for the full area would be laid out. You can see those properties laid out around this central access point, and you can see their proposed planting and buffering screen onto the houses that are in Broadwood Lane and Arthur Moody Drive, and then the areas of open space between the northern section of the site and how they could look with the planting in and around them. And then some visuals just showing how the street scene could potentially look. This is obviously based on the design types that you've seen in front of you. And that is the end of the slideshow. Chairman, the 2 applications are recommended for planning permission, 1 full planning permission with conditions and the execution of a legal agreement, and a second for outline permission with conditions, and again the execution of a legal agreement, and the officer report outlines what that legal agreement would secure. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll now go on to our speakers. May I have Sue Cook? You have, because there's two applications together, you actually get 12 minutes if you wish within that, and starting now.
Okay, thank you for the opportunity for addressing the committee. I'd like to say at the beginning, I will be using the word we in this. That's because I'm representing the residents of Forest Hills, of Broadwood Lane and of Arthur Moody Drive with their full approval and support for what I'm about to say. Firstly, I'd like to publicly apologise to the Planning Committee, as we believe that accusations were levelled at you when you were at the site. We weren't privy to it, but we understand that happened. They weren't made by a resident, but by a daughter visiting her parents. And we're disappointed that you were treated this way, but the outburst does reflect the passionate feelings and the anxiety of the community and the detrimental effect on mental health that the proposed developments are causing, but nevertheless, an apology to you all. You visited the site mid-morning on a weekday in the school holidays, a time when on-street parking and traffic flow is at its minimum, due to this being a working community. A visit on a term time day when the very active church is in use and workers are returning would show a vast increase in both in traffic and in parking. The residents opposed both developments. This hybrid application looks to more than double the size of the current cul-de-sac, but we're pleased they're being considered together as they are undeniably one application. But the community feels let down by the planning officers in the recommendation for conditional approval for both schemes. That, if approved, will devastate the current residents and their everyday lives. The very community that the Planning Committee are there to serve without prejudice, but the developers appear to hold in contempt at every turn as residents' concerns have not been properly considered or portrayed. We strongly support Island Road's recommendation to refuse the outline planning application and note that they have consistently advised this historically at the pre-planning stage, an expert opinion clearly ignored by the current developers. If permission for the 113 houses is refused, a condition must be attached that this doesn't allow the building of the extra houses by stealth, i.e. by smaller individual applications. Although our comments are relevant to both applications, any mitigating suggestions are for the 36 houses. There is nothing that can mitigate the building of 149 houses. When the gaps into the fields in the current cul-de-sac were left some 40 years ago, the developers could never have imagined the size and volume of vehicles that houses would come to attract. The existence of these gaps cannot be allowed to dictate an outcome simply because they are there. Neither can the current proposed developers claim that the Isle of Wight Council has failed to meet housing targets. Indeed, the Council has approved a vast number of developments that haven't yet been started. When completed, they may well, when coupled with the anticipated vast project at the Camp Hill prison site, over-provide accommodation which will attract a mainland swelling of our population, which the current social and emergency services simply cannot cope with and does nothing to fulfil the demand for housing on the island. The nearby houses were built with little off-road parking and any garages are too narrow for today's typical car. Modern, hard-working households mean 2 or 3 cars to a house are inevitable, leading to considerable on-street parking. The proposed developments are totally reliant on the dangerously winding sole access route of Broadwood Lane, Forest Hills and Arthur Moody Drive, and on the liberal application of double yellow lines in recognition of the inability of the road to accommodate more traffic flow, not least the construction vehicles. This would be nothing short of disastrous to a neighbourhood that's absolutely no alternative but these roads. All surrounding roads are oversubscribed and restricted. Gunville Road already uses Broadwood Lane for its overspill. Many of the houses do not have large enough gardens to create off-street parking, even if they wanted to, and any expectation of this is indefensible, both financially and environmentally, in a recognised area prone to flooding and at a time when we're encouraged to maintain lawns and flora. Restricting current parking directly contravenes Section 106, which requires plans that mitigate any impact of a development proposal on the local community and infrastructure, and we do not believe that the plans do this. If planning for approval is given for the 36, it must be a condition that the developers incorporate dedicated parking spaces for current homes in their development. They would need to be dedicated due to the negligible on-road parking provisions for the proposed build. The access onto Gunville Road is already dangerous, visibility restricted by a property boundary to the north and traffic calming measures to the south. The building with home bargains has also massively increased traffic flow in the area. The church has an active social calendar, increasing traffic activity at the junction. When you visited, it wasn't a school day, and if it was, the traffic would have been significantly worse. And I'd ask you to imagine what it would be like with an additional 149 houses all coming out onto Gunville Road. The Waverley roundabout is already over capacity, and these houses will negatively impact the highway network, increasing risks of accidents at this roundabout that was never designed to take so much traffic. Island Roads have historically declared the need for a second access road from the proposed site, but again, this has been ignored. If planning permission is given for the 36 houses, it must be on condition that an access road is built from Forest Road before construction begins, where a bespoke, broad, Clearview junction can be created leading out onto a road served by the St Mary's Traffic Improvement Scheme. Both field gates should be maintained to avoid a rat run and locked to all but emergency services. This would also provide a meaningful wildlife corridor incorporated across the whole boundary, along with a junctionless cycle route. And this is a flood area. Please accept this as fact from the residents who live here 365 days a year. Nothing in the plans adequately addresses this, and the runoff from roads and 36 houses, let alone 149, will make the flooding unimaginably worse. A wall may offer some protection to properties immediately adjacent to the site, but the whole landscape filters water to the Gunville stream and onward to Lutley Brook convergence. It's historically well documented that properties from Gunville through to Newport Quay have been subject to extreme flooding, and the watercourse is already under enormous pressure. Ash Lane still floods despite intervention to allow building on that site. The pressure that 36, let alone 149, will put on this will be catastrophic, and the consequent litigation from householders will be significant. Two dry ponds are a woefully inadequate solution, and to leave them with no one responsible for that upkeep is dismissive and dangerous. We're frankly startled at Andrew White's planning statement that these inevitably unhygienic and potentially very dangerous ponds will provide opportunities to play, and can only think that it's a desperate attempt to comply with Section 106. The lack of any capacity to support further development in this area with regards to sewerage and wastewater disposal is well documented. It's understood that Southern Water are obliged to find a solution in return for a fee per dwelling from the developer, but how exactly will this be done? This could potentially mean horrendous roadworks on the only access road, an immense impact on the local community, a community which appears to be unimportant to the developers who concentrate solely on delivering their project in contempt of those who live there. A pumping station and wet well has been utilised at a neighbouring development, pumping at off-peak hours, but how many properties can these serve? At the Alvington Manor development, which hasn't yet been completed, overwhelmed drains have been observed by residents lifting out of the ground and spewing sewage and wastewater. Also, we would ask what the capacity of existing utilities is without additional infrastructure. Gary Stretch, a council highways engineer, has stated a definitive answer in the respect of the foul water disposal capacity is required before the development can proceed. Another expert opinion ignored by the developer. If planning approval is given, it must be a condition that a full detailed report is received from every utility company. Southern Water have stated that SUDs rely upon facilities which are not adoptable by sewerage undertakers, and therefore Southern Water must approve and supply a meaningful scheme to maximise the safety of the residents and minimise disruption. This scheme should be binding for the developer, with no provision for deviation to a cheaper, less effective alternative by way of a variation to any conditional approval. Public health is at stake. At the time of your visit, the field was planted with oilseed rape. The site has been in continuous farming since 200 BC, both for crops and livestock. Farmland is disappearing at a time when it is more important than ever. Traditional land management has made this a natural habitat for owls, foxes, badgers, dormice, reptiles, kestrels, buzzards, etc., and these cannot be allowed to disappear when all our native species already face an uncertain future. A wildlife corridor, as proposed, when traversed by a road, becomes a kill trap. It's a simple fact. Additionally, this land comprises part of the island plan, which is currently out for public consultation. Granting permission now removes the democratic right of the public's voice to be heard regarding the future of this land. An exploratory archaeological dig in the area proposed for the development has produced exciting results, including the presence of an Iron Age roundhouse, which was covered by the local press. These finds are part of the island's heritage. If planning approval is given, a full excavation that allows all recommendations of the appropriate authorities on the matter must be completed, and the findings fully evaluated by experts before any work starts on the site, with the acceptance that a significant find may restrict or even stop the build altogether. The developer's token gesture to comply with Section 106 by providing a cycle route can't be used as an example of reducing traffic, as the very small percentage of people who do or would commute by bicycle often don't or wouldn't ride all year round and still require a car, and the route still leads to busy roads. Buses cannot be tailored to the needs of families, carers and out-of-town workers, etc. Additional bus capacity won't significantly reduce traffic. It doesn't now, and who in reality would walk in the rain out to Gunville Road to catch a bus when they can get in their car at their door? The elderly would certainly struggle to walk the distance. In addition, home working means that the demand for island homes amongst mainlanders is at a staggering level. What would be done to ensure these houses help to fulfil the demand for island homes for island people? If nothing can be done, the houses will be built for nothing beyond profit. If the council decides that the land is suitable for development and the community truly beseeches you not to, the developer's financial gain must not be the determining factor over and above the needs of the people already living here. The suitability of the site ecologically, environmentally, along with the parking, accessibility, safety, disruption to the resident community, adequate drainage, safe sewage system, etc., should be objectively considered with no regard to targets. We vehemently oppose both proposed developments and implore you to support the homes, the safety and the mental and physical well-being of the community and refuse both applications. Any approval given must include serious and binding conditions to protect both the local community and the wider community that the building of these houses will life-changingly affect. We've used the word devastating and we make no apologies for its use. The prospect of planning approval for these developments is truly devastating, and we thank you for your time.
Thank you. Can I just make reference to thank you for the apology, although I was at the site visit and I didn't experience that myself, and I'm not sure if any members did. Any members did? Huh? Oh, okay. Thank you for your apologies. Thank you.
I'm Andrew White, yes. Thank you, Chairman. As explained by the team leader, Mr. Chick, there are two applications before you for consideration this evening. I will talk about them as a whole, as a comprehensively planned development.
You can start again.
Okay, I think you got the gist of the message I've just provided, insofar as I will present this as a comprehensively planned development, albeit there are two applications before you for consideration. The Council does not have a 5-year supply of housing land and has one of the lowest rates of housing delivery across the country. Earlier this year, central government confirmed that our rate of delivery over the last 3 years is only 54% of what it should be. These factors mean that the presumption in favour of sustainable development applies. Paragraph 11 of the National Planning Policy Framework is therefore engaged. This means that permission must be granted unless any adverse impacts would significantly and demonstrably outweigh the benefits. Before looking at the various benefits associated with this scheme, let's firstly explore some of the main material considerations. So, character of the area. The proposed scheme of 149 dwellings would not jut awkwardly into the countryside and would neatly round off the western edge of the existing settlement, as shown by Mr. Chick on slide 2 of his presentation. This is a visually contained site bounded by a new development off Ash Lane on its northern edge, fairly modern housing along its eastern edge, and new development off Alvington Manor View along part of the southern edge. The overall density would amount to some 23 dwellings per hectare, which is lower than the adjoining housing of Forest Hills, built at 39 dwellings to the hectare. The proposed houses will be constructed by a reputable local developer, offering robust and traditionally designed house types built using quality materials. On to neighbours. Where the proposed layout adjoins existing housing, we've been careful to arrange the units with very spacious separation distances. We've also placed a large area of open space behind some of the properties that front Forest Hills and Arthur Moody Drive. Although the outlook from existing properties would change, we've been careful to design the scheme in a spacious manner, whereby the new dwellings would not be overbearing and good levels of privacy maintained through robust boundary treatments and new planting. On to highway matters. Members will see that the main issue raised by Island Roads in relation to the outline application for 113 dwellings relates to the capacity issues at the Waverley roundabout. The issue being the queue length down the hill on Carisbrooke High Street during the PM peak time. The highway modelling undertaken by our highway experts in relation to the roundabout is based on 150 dwellings for the application site, plus 125 dwellings on a different site on the other side of Gunville Road, being promoted by a different landowner. That scheme is still under consideration by the LPA. If we disaggregate the modelling, which has been undertaken using the industry recognised software Acadi, it shows that our development would increase queue length down Carisbrooke High Street by some 4 vehicles during the PM peak. This is on the assumption that regular drivers won't choose to use an alternative route if they believe the high street to be congested. We would assert that the queue length as a result of this development would not be significant, and whilst arguably adding to driver inconvenience, this does not manifest itself into significant and demonstrable harm from a highway safety point of view when taking account of the tilted balance under the NPPF, the presumption in favour of sustainable development. We have discussed this issue in detail with the case officer, and there is a mutual understanding that the capacity issue at the roundabout cannot be directly mitigated, as there is no space for widening and or the installation of traffic lights. And even if there was, the resultant impacts on the conservation area would likely be unacceptable. The position taken by officers is that capacity issues should not be viewed as an insurmountable constraint to future housing growth on this side of Newport. But should members feel unduly concerned, then the applicant would be open-minded to the prospects of making a financial contribution through the Section 106 legal agreement, which could then go towards any highway improvement schemes that may be promoted by the Highway Authority in the near future to help relieve capacity issues in the vicinity of the site. This could, for example, include Taylor Road, which is seen as having potential to ease congestion should it be reopened. In relation to other highway considerations, paragraph 6.65 of the report before you confirms that extending the double yellow lines at the junction of Gunville Road with Broadwood Lane would offer highway gain and only result in the loss of 1 on-street parking space. Island Roads have not objected on the basis of inadequate visibility at that junction. On to drainage. Concerns were raised over nitrates entering Gunville Stream. However, nitrate pollution is only related to foul flows. All foul flows will discharge to the public sewer. Only surface water flows will be discharged to the stream at the same flow rate as in the pre-development scenario. Some surface water is also going to be discharged into the public sewer, thus reducing overall runoff to the stream and addressing concerns raised by residents in terms of existing flooding issues. The Council's drainage engineer is satisfied that our surface water drainage design will address the existing problems, specifically those affecting number 2 Arthur Moody Drive, which will have a flood wall erected along the boundary of the site for further protection. Southern Water has confirmed there is sufficient capacity within the public sewerage system to accept both foul and surface water flows from the site. It should be noted that surface water will be attenuated and stored on site before being slowly released to either Gunville Stream or the public sewer. The pre- and post-development flow rates will be matched, resulting in significant betterment for properties bounding the site, as the flows are specifically channelled and positively drained. To reiterate, all matters relating to drainage can therefore be covered by condition in the knowledge that they have been carefully considered by a firm of experienced engineers, with residents' current issues fully addressed and signed off by the Council's drainage engineer. Now let's look at some of the benefits. The key benefit, of course, is the delivery of a mixed housing scheme offering a range of dwelling types in terms of size and tenure. Putting this into context, monitoring reports on the Council's website show there were 963 housing completions during the last 3 years, which is woefully low, some 900 short of what it should be, plus only 24 affordable homes built in 3 years. We are proposing 149 dwellings, which would include 52 affordable homes. 13 of these affordable homes would be based on the government's recently introduced First Homes initiative, whereby dwellings would be offered with a minimum discount of 30%, which is then passed on to subsequent buyers down the chain, therefore offering that form of affordable housing in perpetuity. Therefore, a market house valued at $225,000 would be available at just over $150,000 for first-time buyers. The applicant is a well-known island developer with a proven track record of delivery. DN Associates Limited are an island-based building contractor who also undertake developments on their own behalf. They've been trading for almost 22 years, employing all local labour. During the last 5 years or so, they've constructed some 255 dwellings, excluding any refurbishment works or large single dwellings, contributing £40 million to the island economy. The proposed development will bring a selection of 1, 2, 3 and 4 bedroom dwellings priced within the island's average range, whilst achieving good traditional builds, well-spaced plots, generous gardens, plenty of parking and good amenity space in an area that has been allocated for development for some years. This scheme alone will bring a further £20 million to the island's economy. Throughout the process, the applicants have been undertaking in-depth discussions with a local affordable housing provider who have indicated that should the scheme be approved, they would gladly enter into an agreement with Dean Associates, as they are a known entity to the Housing Association, having delivered previous schemes on their behalf within recent years. In addition to the substantial social and economic benefits, we are also proposing open space, enhanced surface water drainage, a 350-metre cycle link towards the West White Greenway, and a financial contribution of £50,000 towards sustainable transport initiatives. The applicant's track record of housing delivery, their reputation for build quality and trading history, together with their local connections, speaks for itself. They are ready to deliver this project now and would commence within a matter of months from receiving permission, with a build programme of over 3 to 5 years. Phase 1 would include 36 dwellings, of which 6 would be affordable. The balance of affordable housing would be provided in years 2 and 3. The scheme has been designed with local needs in mind and with consideration for the surrounding community. We understand that building to a large scale on greenfield land will be controversial and it invokes a range of fears and concerns. We get that. At the same time, there is an undeniable requirement for house building, and a degree of restrained outward growth such as this is inevitable in order to achieve our housing numbers. You have to look at the surrounding area to see how the community has evolved and how modern housing has settled into the environment. I particularly refer you to the Carisbrooke Park estate or Fieldfair Road as a good example, in my opinion, where there are various cul-de-sacs named after birds such as Kingfisher Close, Goldcrest Close and Lark Rise. Historically, that area was fields, but over 20 to 30 years, the estate has matured very successfully and the houses have proved to be very popular family homes. Our site is no different. We propose a spacious, attractive and robust housing scheme which, like Carisbrooke Park, will settle into its environment, providing for a range of homes for current and for future generations. So, members, your housing policies are out of date. There is no 5-year supply and the rate of delivery on the island is amongst the lowest across the country, and thus the presumption in favour applies. This proposal of 149 homes, including 52 affordable homes, along with other significant contributions, will make a difference, a big difference. Each time you consider whether this scheme would have an adverse impact, you must ask yourselves whether there is evidence to demonstrate that such impacts would be significant and outweigh the considerable benefits of this scheme. We assert that there is no such evidence and therefore politely request that permission is granted so that the developer can make a meaningful contribution towards much needed housing growth within a sustainable location, duly designated as a key regeneration area, where there is an expectation that schemes such as this should take place. Members, many thanks for your time this evening. Thank you.
Thank you. I think you're obviously under time, so thank you for that. Can we now have the representative from Northwood Parish Council? Oh, sorry, Newport and Carisbrooke Community Council, Matthew Ambrosini? Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I'm grateful for the opportunity to speak. I'm here on behalf of Newport and Carisbrooke Community Council as one of the 2 community councillors for the Carisbrooke and Gunville ward. As the papers before you set out, the community councillors objected to both of these planning applications. Firstly, I wish to acknowledge that those of you sitting in determination of these applications today are more experienced than me in these matters and are no doubt well versed on the planning policy issues which must be considered in relation to applications such as these. However, what we have in common is that we are all elected members chosen by the public to represent their interests on important issues such as these. Therefore, in appearing before you today, I am urging you to join me in ensuring that the concerns of the communities we represent, particularly of those in Carisbrooke and Gunville, are taken into account in the committee's decision. This brings me to the issue of the officers' report. Over many pages, your planning officers have set out a comprehensive analysis of the issues under consideration in relation to these 2 applications, before reaching the conclusion that they should be recommended for approval. But the key thing is that these are just recommendations, not a decision. Quite rightly, that decision sits with all you here this evening, and I will now set out how and why, having closely considered the relevant policy issues that the committee can with confidence, vote to refuse these applications. Furthermore, I consider that such decisions would be defendable at appeal. My fellow members of the Newport and Carisbrooke Community Council consider that the application should be refused on the grounds of highway issues, as vehicle access to the site is insufficient and inappropriate for the expected traffic to the site. The displacement of parking for residents and ongoing highway safety has also caused concern. This is already deemed to be a dangerous area for both vehicles and pedestrians, and the members of the Community Council are conscious that the development is only likely to make this worse. In addition, members of the Community Council raised concerns regarding drainage and would want to see how this has been identified and going to be addressed, along with a potential flood risk to the area. I will focus primarily on the Community Council's highways concerns. It is clear that they are not alone in these, as paragraph 5.5 of the report sets out. The highways engineer has recommended refusal of the outline application for 113 homes, even though he supports a smaller, more detailed application for 36. And as paragraphs 5.11 and 5.12 of the report set out, concerns are shared by many objectors to both schemes. These are the people who use these roads every day and understand, far better than anyone else, the various issues affecting road usage and safety in the area. All of the issues set out in paragraphs 5.11 and 5.12 of the report are true and highly relevant to the decision before members today. I will not repeat them now as they speak for themselves. Paragraph 6.3 onwards of the report provides a comprehensive assessment of the highways implications of both schemes. Clearly, the detailed scheme of 36 units will, by its very nature, have a lesser adverse impact than the detailed scheme of 113 units, but I consider it is very important that the impact is considered both individually and collectively. The consideration for members today is whether the adverse impacts of each scheme is sufficient to warrant refusal. I firmly believe that it is. Gunville has already seen applications for 90 new housing units being approved in recent years, some of which are already occupied and others remain under construction. These properties are accessed from the west side of Gunville Road in the same area as those proposed in these two applications. These 90 new units are already putting a strain on the highway network that was originally designed for far fewer properties. The capacity is already being stretched. It is therefore appropriate to refuse both schemes this evening on highway grounds. A handful of houses here or there, or an infill piece of land would perhaps be bearable, but any approval this evening will see at least 36 new homes being built, in addition to all those already under construction and occupation, with significant expansion to the settlement boundary contradictory to the draft island planning strategy, which is currently out for consultation. Paragraph 6.66 is very clear that the outline development will have a negative impact on the Waverley Mini roundabout junction. As someone who uses this junction daily, I know how dangerous it is, with the traffic regularly coming from all directions and no physical space to widen or improve it. It is simply unacceptable to burden this area with the traffic associated with even more new homes, as the report sets out. Without this development, the junction would be exceeding capacity at peak times by 2025, and therefore the approval of both schemes would further impact capacity and in turn highway safety. The conclusion of officers in paragraph 6.67 and 6.71 that this impact would be acceptable is simply wrong, irrational and unjustifiable. They should be listening to the highways experts rather than disregarding their professional assessment in such a cavalier manner. Therefore, contrary to officers' conclusions in paragraph 6.73 of the report, I consider that both of these applications would not be acceptable in highways terms, and they are contrary to the policy SP7 for travel, DM2 design quality for new development, and DM17 sustainable travel of the core strategy. This application can and should be refused on this basis. I would now like to briefly touch on the issue of flooding and drainage. With the amount of impermeable hard landscaping from the two developments, the inevitability of more surface water runoff and grey water is an issue that can't be ignored. It is contaminated and will damage the water quality of the Gunville stream and thus the local ecosystems, as paragraph 6.76 of the report acknowledges. The stream is home to protected and vulnerable species such as water voles, crested newts, bullheads, and many other freshwater inhabitants, including showing signs of otters. The risk to this area from development is contradictory to the work of the Environment Agency in ensuring the well-being of local species in the area. In addition to this, the Gunville area has been has been known for a long time to be susceptible to flooding, something I know of having lived in the area previously. And this is a problem which will no doubt be exacerbated by hard landscaping. Adding a couple of soak-away ponds to catch surface water is just not going to be adequate. The main sewer and road drainage systems are not adequate to manage the current levels. This can only be made worse by more development in the area. We must also consider the extreme rainfall we are experiencing with climate change. Harsh weather events are going to be more frequent in the future, and with the current system struggling, we can only expect in 4 times the deluge the very real danger of southern water facilities being overwhelmed and forced yet again to discharge even more foul water and sewerage into the River Medina, which we all know the impacts of. The application is therefore contrary to policy DM14 of flood risk for the core strategy. I would now like to turn to the issue of the presumption in favour of sustainable development. Because of the current position of the Isle of Wight not being able to demonstrate a 5-year housing land supply or having an up-to-date development plan. Paragraph 6.5 of the report suggests that because of the Council's annual monitoring reports and housing delivery tests demonstrate that delivery over the last 3 years has been in the region of 54%, that it is not necessary for the applicant to demonstrate a need, as policy SP1 is considered to be out of date. In a similar vein, the Council issued a press release on the 30th of July saying that the authority has no choice but to consider planning applications under a presumption in favour of sustainable development. This may be true, but as the same press release also said, the Council will continue to refuse applications where appropriate. Let us focus on the latter this evening. It is also important that we look at the relevant case law, as that has the potential to give the committee the confidence to make the right decision. Last year, 2 inspectors refused planning permission for developments in Northamptonshire and Essex, even though the 2 councils could not demonstrate a 5-year housing land supply. The inspector found that the need to boost housing land in the area was not the be-all and end-all, and that the adverse impacts of the proposals significantly and clearly outweighed the articulated benefits. In this case, the applicant sought to legally challenge the inspector's decisions because they felt that paragraph 11(d)(ii) of the National Planning Policy Framework, which relates to the presumption in favour of granting planning permission, had not been properly applied. Crucially, the Court of Appeal held that the NPPF does not prevent decision makers from taking relevant development policies, whether out of date or not, into account, on top of any relevant NPPF policies. Crucially, whether the development plan policies are taken into account and the weight attributed to them is a matter of planning judgment for the decision maker, i.e. all of you here today. You are collectively the decision maker, and it is your right to reach an informed decision, balancing the significant harm against the alleged benefits. The Court of Appeal found that the inspectors did not err in law in refusing permission and upheld their decisions. Ultimately, the ruling emphasised that while the lack of a 5-year housing land supply may tilt the balance in favour of granting planning permission for residential development, it is not determinative, and applications can still be refused on such circumstances where significant adverse impacts would arise, as they would in this case. Having regard for all of what I have outlined, I would urge members not to give undue weight to the presumption of favour of sustainable development, but instead consider the relevant development policies as still being highly relevant. Yes, we need new homes on the island, and there is a significant number of proposals being brought forward for elsewhere on the island, including more appropriate brownfield sites. Gunville has already taken more than its fair share of new homes, and our highways capacity cannot cope with any more on this scale. There are sound policy-based reasons for the refusal of both these applications, and these adverse impacts do clearly outweigh the benefits of meeting the need of additional housing. I consider that this committee can refuse both of these applications, confident that these decisions, like those I have mentioned, will be upheld by the inspectors on appeal. Please support the residents of Gunville in rejecting both of these applications. Thank you.
Thank you, Matthew. Can we now have the ward councillor, Councillor Joe Lever? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Firstly, I'd like to state that I understand we have a real need for housing on the island. However, that shouldn't open the floodgates to poor schemes in unsuitable locations, which ultimately leads to residents and the council paying for further down the line. I believe we as a local planning authority have a duty to responsibly shape our island for communities, not just for today's needs, but for generations to come. I'm also concerned by comments in the report that suggest a planning culture of the council that views green spaces simply as gaps to be filled. claiming that either application is achieving sustainable development, I believe to be incorrect, particularly regarding the outline element. In the Planning Officer's final report, paragraphs 8, 9 and 110 of the National Planning Policy Framework are referenced. In my mind, the outline element hits 0 of the 3 overarching objectives set out in paragraph 8, nor the stipulations in paragraphs 9 and 110. I hope the following considerations demonstrate that. There is a totally unnecessary highway safety issue. The full element has, as I can tell, 24 of 36 dwellings, and the outline has 56 of the proposed 113 dwellings with no direct pedestrian access. Therefore, both elements, by design, encourage car use. I believe this goes directly against the sustainability guidance set out in the National Planning Policy Framework, in particular paragraph 105, which is also referenced in the report. It also means residents of these properties will currently have to walk into road to reach designated walkways. This is particularly concerning for the elderly, children and people with accessibility needs. I'm astonished at how little thought has been given to these groups of people throughout the scheme. It's particularly concerning given that the outline plan wasn't dealing with an insignificant amount of space, so it would appear there's been a conscious prioritisation of vehicles over people. The increase in car use will naturally lead to traffic generation in the area. This is particularly relevant to the outline element, with major concern around the effect on the existing Broadwood Lane, Gunville Road junction, and the Waverley Mini roundabout, the latter of which Island Road share my concern and have recommended refusal for the outline plan on this basis. Even without the development of this scheme, the junction is predicted to exceed peak capacity in the PM by 2025, as others have already stated. Therefore, approval of the outline element in particular would only exacerbate this issue. The report suggests that residents would have the alternative option to use Forest Road. I'm honestly shocked that this is offered as an acceptable option, seeing as the stretch of Forest Road leading down to White House Road junction is notoriously one of the most dangerous on the island. There will be a loss of parking for existing residents. Island Roads have recommended that a TRO be sought to introduce double lines on Forest Hills and Arthur Moody Drive. This is risky, as should the TRO not be secured, as is stated in the report, service vehicles would not be able to safely negotiate the Arthur Moody Drive Forest Hills junction. It's also worth asking why residents who have long been able to park within a reasonable distance of their home, and particularly residents with accessibility needs who are reliant on this access, have that taken away due to this scheme. If approved, this scheme will effectively take parking from existing residents and add it to new ones. The scheme could have accommodated the site for existing resident parking, but has failed to do so. This isn't fair or conducive to building a thriving community. We should not be making the lives of existing residents harder by approving this scheme. Dry throat. If approved in its entirety, the number of dwellings, in addition to those in the adjacent developments, will likely put significant pressure on local infrastructure. The report rather worryingly seems to rebut this concern by stating that not all dwellings would accommodate people new to the area or island. However, I couldn't see any rationale provided for this assumption, and I would argue that this cannot currently be guaranteed. I also found the offering of green space in both elements inadequate. One small corner in the northwest of the outline element and 3 small islands between housing, and additionally 2 attenuation ponds in the full element, does not provide an acceptable level of communal space, nor would the pond be safe for children to play around, as has been suggested. Given the escalating climate situation, the risk of flooding on the island will only get worse. We as a council and any future planning must accommodate for this. Currently, as previously mentioned, the scheme has 2 dry ponds acting as attenuation sites and an unconfirmed protection wall as a form of flood defence for an area that already experiences relatively frequent flooding. This level of flood defence feels, given what I've mentioned, careless and irresponsible, and at an absolute minimum, those aspects of the site must have a formal and appropriate maintenance schedule. Development on this arable land, which I'm reliably told has been farmed since at least 200 BC, will result in more of the island's agricultural land and subsequent fruit production potential being lost, particularly with regard to the outline element. Considering global climate targets, there is a need for the UK and the island to become more self-sufficient with regard to food production. By approving these applications, we would be denying ourselves another opportunity to holistically tackle the climate and ecological emergency we find ourselves in. It's worth noting that the new draft island plan would support my view on this aspect. In conclusion, paragraph 11 of the National Planning Policy Framework, as referenced in the report, advises a presumption in favour of sustainable development unless any adverse impacts of doing so would significantly and demonstrably outweigh the benefits. when assessed against the policies in the framework taken as a whole. I think there have been a breadth of adverse impacts demonstrated that other speakers have also expanded on that far outweigh the benefits. I don't believe either element can be considered truly sustainable and would ask the committee to review both the entire application, both elements. At the very least, I would implore the committee to refuse the outline element, which is a particularly poor scheme. Should the full or entire hybrid application be granted approval, I would request that all conditions outlined in the report and mentioned in the previous speaker's minutes be attached, and would also request a Section 106 agreement to provide an acceptable communal space for residents with play park equipment, ongoing maintenance of the attenuation ponds, and additional parking space designated for residents of Arthur Drive, Forest Hills and Broadwood Lane, who will lose accessible parking due to this scheme. Thank you for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you. Can I bring it to your officer, Russell Chick, if there's anything you wish to respond to any of the speakers?
No, thank you, Chairman.
Mr. Ranson from Highways.
All I can say is obviously in the report, all the details that were in the report have been highlighted where Island Roads is concerned with the Waverley roundabout, which is going to be at or over capacity without any development in 4 years' time. And obviously, therefore, the additional traffic generation of this scheme will obviously exacerbate the potential problems that we've got in that area. The constraints of that area means that there are no engineering solutions available. Therefore, that roundabout is what it is. It can't be modified in any way. Can't put traffic signals in. And I said, with the full application, it's got conditional approval from Island Roads on the basis of the conditions with the TROs, which, as I say, cannot be guaranteed because they go through a separate legal process with consultation. So obviously they would have to be a pre-construction condition, where obviously if they're not approved, therefore Island Roads would not support either of the applications. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. So Councillor Lever's point on things in the conditions, I think I picked up about monies in Section 106 regarding communities, also extra parking and maintenance. I think there was an area about children's facilities. If we can actually make a note of those, they might wish to refer back to those. Open to members' questions. Councillor Cook.
First, an observation. I think anyone who goes around the Waverley roundabout about the time that the schools are dropping off would say it's over capacity at this point in time. But the questions, the archaeology report shows a roundhouse on the site. Can you show us whereabouts on the site that roundhouse is, please? I've got another one after that.
Thank you, Councillor Quirk. Yes, I will just zoom through to some slides that I have in my back pocket, as it were. Too far. Right, so the blue outline you can see on this plan, which is archaeological survey plan showing the various trenches that have been undertaken. That blue line is the full application relating to the 36 houses. The blue and green lines are trenching, which has been concentrated in the full area for the application site. The red arrow I've added just to show where this ditched enclosure is. So that's the location of it. It is in the location of the outline part of the site. If I just zoom one slide back, it's effectively around here. So in the area of back gardens, either for the full or the outline section of the site.
So I'd be right in thinking that there wouldn't be any excavation of foundations in that immediate area?
Yes, so I think the thing to say at the moment is that section of the site hasn't been a section of a trial pit. The archaeologist has, the council's archaeology officer has advised us that there should be a written scheme of investigation which forms one of the conditions for the outline recommendation. That would require some trenching work to take place within the area of that, what may be an Iron Age roundhouse or might be a ditched enclosure, but those pits would be undertaken so that those trenches would be undertaken so that it could be fully evaluated. That information would be provided to local planning authority, and we would consult with the archaeologist for comments on that. If it did need to change the layout of the outline, that could be taken into account if approved, and then if we do get a reserved matters application. What the archaeologist has said to us is that effectively because of the findings in the area, because of the existing heritage assets in the area, her view is that it's unlikely that whatever is in that area is to be of national importance. It's more likely to be of local importance, so it would be a process of recording the information that come out of those trenches and that written scheme of investigation. That information would be put on the historic environment record for interest, and then the development could take place. But obviously we're in a position where we haven't got detailed trenches yet, but they are conditioned.
The other issue, we have differences of opinion between supporters and objectors as to the impact of traffic. Has any consideration been given to possibilities of other access points to the site to stop the traffic being funneled down towards the Waverley roundabout? Obviously, if you had an easy way to get onto Forest Road, that would take you to most of the employment areas in the local area. I know there's a big chunk of land in between. Has any consideration been given to doing something of that nature to divert the traffic away from the Waverley roundabout?
Yes, I understand that there have been discussions previously before the application being submitted. As members will note from the site visit, councillors will note from the site visit, it wouldn't be appropriate to put any access to the south because of changes in levels and the character of that area of the landscape. Also, I think putting an access up into Forest Road would require significant highway work across a rural area beyond this site and beyond the existing residential areas of Gunville, and that would have its own impacts. But I think what I would say, and what I always say for a planning application, is you need to judge what's in front of you at the moment. And the proposals at the moment are for all of the access traffic to come onto Gunville Road via Broadwood Lane. I think one point that was made during public speaking was that officers have disregarded the comments of the highway officer, but officers will never disregard the statutory consultee. But the statutory consultee is looking at one defined element of a planning application. They're not looking at all of the balance that the planning authority, and that includes obviously councillors and officers, will look at. So this planning application is a balance of a range of issues and how they then are balanced up. So highways being one of those important issues, the housing obviously being one of those as well, amplified by the fact that the council doesn't have a 5-year housing supply. So I think it's important to make that distinction, is that officers haven't put aside those comments, but have balanced up a range of issues and come to a conclusion that officers have made. But as in public speaking, it is a recommendation, it's not a decision.
Any other questions? Councillor Churchman.
Yes, first of all, could you tell me please how many houses there are on the existing development in front of what the proposed area is?
I'm afraid I can't tell you how many there are.
As we all obviously went there last Friday, having walked round it, in my view, it seemed very densely populated. looking at the draft, I noticed that, in fact, the number of houses per hectare is actually reasonably good, not as dense as it could be. But what obviously worries me is the total inadequacy of the road system to even get into the existing development, let alone adding to it. And to talk... And to,
can I ask the public,
talk about yellow lining small sections of the access area, I find incredible. I noticed many houses on that estate, in fact, do not have any parking whatsoever. We're talking about one parking space per house. I'm sorry, but in this day and age, to me, that is an absolute nonsense. Anything with 2 and 3 bedrooms, you should have a minimum of 2 parking spaces. I just cannot see where the existing residents are going to park, and certainly I can't even understand where the new housing development where residents will park. Then, of course, we have the road outside. As you leave the existing estate, on the right-hand side, as you leave the estate, you have a pinch point. I'm assuming that pinch point will remain. I cannot understand how additional traffic coming out of that exit will cause nothing but total traffic jam. That road is not particularly wide anyway. The pinch point will, well, as I said, I can't imagine in the morning when people are going to school, going to work, we're talking about between 8 and 9. Probably the afternoon is more staggered because children come out of school 3, 3:30, whatever, and people come home from work at 5. But in the morning, between 8 and 9, exiting what is currently there must be a nightmare. And to talk about adding a possible outline permission for 139 houses, to my mind, is just totally wrong. If you look at hold on.
Are you asking a question, Vanessa?
Yeah, well, I struggle with highways saying that it's in any way acceptable. So perhaps either of you could enlarge on that.
There were several points about the housing, the access, the pinch points, etc. Can you answer those?
Right, when Island Roads does a report, basically we do a factual report to the planners so that, again, as Russell said, we are just one of many consultees. So we just deal with the highway elements. We say what they need to achieve and what they can achieve. Now, for that development, whether you talk about just the outline or the whole thing with the full as well, to access those areas for a refuse service vehicle, they've got to be free from on-street parking. So that's where the double yellow lines come into it. Now, if you read the report, it does actually highlight the concern for the amount of traffic coming out of Broadwood Lane onto Gunville Road. But it was not seen in planning terms as a standalone reason for refusal. So that's with the stance of Island Roads and in the way that planning works. Now, when it comes to the junctions, this is why it was emphasised about the Waverley roundabout, because that affects the, a wider commuter sort of like area. With the stacking onto the residential part from a highway sort of like commuter route point of view, we've got to take that balanced approach. So, but going back to the double yellow lines, this is why we said that basically for it to be serviced by emergency services, refuse service vehicle, which will be every week, hopefully emergency services are very rarely required, then those areas need to be sterilised of on-street parking. So that's where that comes in. But we also do realise that obviously any sterilisation there puts added pressure elsewhere within the local highway network. Okay.
Thank you.
Safe and suitable access to the site can be achieved for all users, and I just can't see that. Any significant impacts from the development on the transport network in terms of capacity and congestion or on highway safety can be cost effectively mitigated, and so far that has not been proved to me.
Thank you, Chairman. Could we be shown, I know we've shown on site, but I think it's worth demonstrating it on a map up on the screen, exactly which areas of Broadwood Lane and the other roads are going to have W lines put in place if the TRO was successful, and exactly where those points start and finish, if possible. Because I think it's important to be clear. I think even some residents might not be clear on that, but that will open up probably the next question from me. Thank you.
Right, with the outline, which is the main part, with the new access coming in, so it's the circa 20 to 30, so 15 to 20 metres either side of the junction on Arthur Moody Road on both sides, all the way into the access up to and including the plateau that you can see on the drawing. For the full one, it is again the same extent either side of the Forest Hills and all the way in up to the boundary of the new development, so up to and including the existing turning head. With regards to Broadwood Lane and Gunville Road, it's the existing WLOs that are going around the radius on the, if you're coming out on the right hand side, so it's the southern side, that's to extend that up to the first access protection bar, which is at the church rear access, on the basis that currently there's 2 vehicles space that can park there. So it increases that length. Plus you've got the accesses and the access protection bars. So it actually, from a parking point of view, that sterilises that length. That provides an additional bit of stacking within Broadwood Lane for obviously vehicles coming back round past the parked cars that are currently there. That is the only extent. Obviously we heard that on site that people assumed that the WLOs was going through the full length of the residential road. That's not the case. Okay.
Councillor Price.
Yeah, I'll try to keep it to a question, but it is tricky because I think when we get to this point on site, I think all members observed the entrance into Broadwood Lane, the length of Broadwood Lane up to the first corner. Now we could see there would be WL lines on that corner, which we understand the reason for that fully, but it looks, it's an impossible thing to really visualise the potential of 150 households, which would easily be 300 cars, going up and down Broadwood Lane, navigating the parked cars on the left, down what is already quite a narrow road. I'm struggling to see how, without going into any further opinions or anything else at this point, I'm really struggling to understand how we are even sat here now considering Broadwood Lane as the first access into a site of 150 additional houses, which could be at least 300 vehicles. It just does not seem possible that that road can cope with that. And then you look into the site where we're displacing the parked vehicles with the W lines. There's no additional parking for them. Then the development itself with the full and the out, they're both not providing enough parking, and where is parking for any additional visitors? I think this application at this point is failing on the access and the availability of additional parking and servicing the current parking needs. That's without even going into the issues with the wider highway network. So I'm sat here now looking to be convinced that and I actually want to just talk about green infrastructure as well, but I'll come back to that later on. But just on the highway element and access alone, without going any wider than Broadwood Lane, Forest View and Arthur Moody Drive, can someone convince me that that is adequate for that development? Because at the moment, I cannot, there's nothing that has demonstrated to me that it is adequate.
Can I state that obviously Island Roads have highlighted that and actually recommending refusal for the larger developments. So in a sense, there isn't anything to convince you because it's actually in the report. Wouldn't that? Do you want to add to that?
I'd just like to add that I can do this as a general for all developments. There's the regulations which for residential type areas for basically 40 mile an hour limits below. There's manual for streets too. And basically as long as it fits in with that, then obviously there'll be no reason for any highways refusal because it meets the regulations.
May I make a comment, Chairman? But it's very relevant. Ashley Road development back in 2007, they wanted to build 300 houses there. They were told they could not build more than that because a single road entrance was the maximum that highways recommended. I reckon if you added up that lot, there's already at least 200 houses on that development. So in my eyes, you're actually going over the top about your own judgment of one access road. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, Councillor Brodie.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. There are two issues for me that I'd just like some clarity about. One related to highways and also the second one regarding the affordable housing that was referred to earlier. In terms of the highways, I'm really struggling with this. I'm a Newport councillor like Councillor Price, and I think we both know this side of the town, of our community, parish area, pretty well. And I'm really struggling with how anything's going to be managed just using Broadwood Lane as an access there. But then there is the broader issues of Carisbrooke and Gunville and the west side of Newport, where Island Roads have referred to the issues on Carisbrooke High Street. And it's interesting that the agent said it would only be at peak because of this development, and the one east of Gunville Road, Island Roads refute that. It seems to me that with the island planning strategy out for consultation at the moment, that refers to this site, that refers to the site by the red blob, which is east of Gunville Road. There's also a potential site just below Carisbrooke College on Taylor Road, and also some additional houses off Sylvan Drive, that we really need to be looking at the whole highways infrastructure of that part of Newport. And I would just like to ask if there have been any discussions with this developer and any other developers in this area regarding appropriate contributions towards the highways infrastructure to perhaps bring Taylor Road, which I believe is the green line on there, into full use in the future, to start relieving some of the pressure on Carisbrooke High Street and Priory Road, which I don't know if you can show where Priory Road is, Russell, there, that's it. Some of the pressure there. So I'd like to know if there's been any discussions regarding that. Secondly, regarding the affordable housing, the magic bullet for so many planning applications, because, of course, not only are we told by central government we have to build so many houses, but we also, many of us, including me, recognise there is a real need for affordable housing on the Isle of Wight. And what I was concerned listening to the agent was his references to houses at a price of £150,000 being affordable to many people on the island who couldn't even dream of buying a house at 100,000, let alone 150,000. Can we have a bit more detail about whether there's going to be appropriate levels of rented affordable housing rather than starter homes or whatever they're called at 150,000? Because frankly, as somebody who wants to see affordable housing and doesn't really care about anything else, I don't consider houses at 150,000 as affordable housing. Thank you, Chair.
You.
Just to say that just prior to this meeting, I spoke to the Highways Authority, and obviously they mentioned about Taylor Road and obviously a contribution. All I can say is at the present there is no approved scheme at all. So obviously it's been on the table for many years. There is obviously scope for some works to go there, but as there's no approved scheme, it's very difficult to obviously attribute a cost and therefore any type of contribution to it. And obviously we can't comment on what anything will be and how much for mitigation against the level of increased traffic it would produce. So, in other words, how long's a piece of string?
Okay, Mr. Bolton.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. If I can just pick up on both the points that Councillor Brodie has made and the answer that Mr. Ransom has already given. In direct answer to your question, Councillor Brodie, yes, we have been speaking to a number of different landowners in that area around what a more holistic highway solution might look like in this area, given the level of development that is being considered. And the route shown on the slide, Taylor Road, is very much one of those areas that we've been considering, given, well, I think we're all well versed in the restrictions of the Waverley roundabout and the issues there. So that is something that we are actively in dialogue with developers and the Highways Authority about joining up the dots on that issue. On your second point, Councillor Brodie, I think I would simply highlight that what is proposed as affordable housing under this particular application is in accordance with the NPPF definition of affordable housing. As we know, there are significant issues on the island in terms of what actually constitutes island affordable homes, and that is different to what the definition in national policy says. This is a big piece of work that we've been looking at through the island planning strategy, although we cannot give weight to those emerging policies at this time as they are so early in their preparation. But we do have to work within that national definition as it stands at the moment. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Price.
Thank you, Chairman. Sorry to come back again. Just on further to Councillor Brodie's point about Taylor Road. I mean, I think most Newport councillors will already be at a loss as to why Taylor Road hasn't been brought into use long before now as an escape route for the buses, if nothing else, from Wellington Road. But the schools have solved that one for us, I guess, by creating a bus park for the kids being dropped off now. But even so, if Taylor Road was brought into use, you're effectively just creating another way in and out of there. You're not solving the wider highways issue of the Waverley Junction. You are not solving that, because you cannot say that future capacity could travel along Taylor Road into Wellington Road with 3 large schools in, or to run through the Sylvan Drive estate. It doesn't solve it entirely. It's an option. It's something that needs looking at. It's a scheme I would love to see happen, but I don't believe that that is the magic bullet that solves the issues of the Waverley roundabout. Thank you.
Okay, well, I'm going to move on to the debate now.
Yes, please, Michael. It was about the dry ponds, actually. I wanted to go back to that. I know it was mentioned, but about the suitability and safety of those. Could I be sort of told a bit more about those, please? Because I didn't find a lot in the pack about those. Thank you.
Mr. Chick?
Yes, I mean, ultimately they're a drainage solution, and drainage, surface water, drainage, flooding is an issue that planning authorities should look into, their material considerations. In terms of safety, there are obvious solutions to that, and that would be to potentially fence them. But that is something obviously that could be considered if the scheme was approved.
Do you have a point?
I have a question regarding, is this site actually at sea level? Because obviously I think of going up Carisbrook and back up to Forest Road. So is it at sea level? Have Southern Water actually been down? And have they given us any plans, or given planning, any plans of the existing drainage? Because what worries me, the island is covered in old Victorian drainage, which can't cope when we get tremendous rainfalls. So I'd like some idea of where, or have Southern Water just sat at Worthing and pressed buttons? Thank you.
Are you able to answer that question? Yes, so Mr. Chick can answer that, yeah.
Yeah, I always look at land levels. So the site, the lowest part of the site is 24 metres AOD, so 24 metres above datum, and the top part of the site is 32.6 metres above datum. So it's quite a high site really when you consider the island, that central plateau of the island does raise up from the sea quite a lot. You don't potentially feel it because it's over a large area, but it is above sea level. In terms of drainage, Southern Water have provided their comments. They've confirmed they have capacity to cater for the development. I also noticed in the drainage report that's been submitted that the developer has been in conversations with Southern Water about gaining the required capacity for this site, and that is a separate process outside of planning. It's called Section 106, annoyingly, just to confuse things, but that is a separate process between the developer and Southern Water, but ultimately Southern Water have a duty to connect to housing developments. They were also consulted on the island plan when that was undertaken with its housing numbers within it, so well aware of that. And therefore, from an officer's point of view, capacity in the network isn't an issue.
Thank you. Can we open it up for the debate now? Councillor Price.
Thank you, Chairman. First of all, I want to say that none of this is aimed at the developer in any shape or form. I've looked at the developer's track record, and they've got a good track record of delivering good quality developments. But it comes down to this site, really. When it comes to drainage and talking about how far above sea level this site is entirely irrelevant when it comes to land drainage, because you've got what I would, as a local lad, refer to as Chillerton Down to the side of it. We'll probably all call it something different, but the runoff from that into the valley is there all the time. Some of it goes into the Lukeley Brook, some of it goes elsewhere, but a lot of it drains through the best drainage system we've got, which is farmland and fields. So building on any field, we should consider carefully, and we should consider it carefully because it's a loss of our green infrastructure. Our green infrastructure, whether you're building around it or you've got green gaps between other developments, is still our green infrastructure, and it performs various tasks, and one of that is drainage. Of course, we'll have a drainage scheme. I've got a garage that's located next to Power Meadows or St George's Gate, whatever you want to call it, and I can tell you that drainage schemes do work. The drainage scheme up there has reduced water through our site, which was actually placed into a flood zone a while ago, which now I can absolutely categorically say is not a flood zone because of the drainage scheme. But we don't know what drainage scheme will work up there. We don't know how it will work with the other drainage schemes. It's an entirely different location to the one I'm talking about, that I live and breathe every day. And you do have, experience from living in and around these areas throughout my life. We've all got experience of how these areas do hold water, but I won't go too far into drainage, but it must be something that we consider and don't just rely on the drainage schemes. They do perform a task, but each time you take a field away, you are removing part of the natural drainage of the local land. And the topography of Gunville means that it's been susceptible to flooding over the years. I think I'm right in saying that we were told at the Ash Lane development, the self-build development, we were told by either a representative from Southern Water or from information from Southern Water that the main sewer was to be upgraded in the next 6 years. And I'm sure I'm right in saying that. That was to connect it to the pumping station, which I think is just off of the dual carriageway, somewhere on Honeyhill, which was upgraded some time ago. But the main sewage pumping station there receives the water from various locations, and I believe one of those is Gunville, and we were told it was at capacity, nearly at capacity at the Ash Lane development, and that it was due for upgrading. So perhaps if there's any information available to that, or if not, could it be explored? I want to sort of just mention Mr. White's suggestion that we've got the lowest delivery of housing across the country, or certainly affordable housing across the country. But that may be the case. But then, you know, we've got exceptional circumstances. We're an island. There are reasons that developers don't build here. There are reasons that sites come forward, they get approved, and they don't get developed. There's reasons for it. That's why. That doesn't just mean that we can lean or fall over on every single application that comes before us and allow the presumption in favour of development. I won't do that when I participate. But we still have to have material reasons for a refusal. I feel that the material reasons for refusal on this application simply come down to not the supply of the housing, not the quality of the housing, not the quality of the builder. It's all down to the access. If we were looking at an access from somewhere else other than Broadwood Lane, Forest Hills and Arthur Moody Drive, we would be looking at this entirely different, because it couldn't come from anywhere else on Gunville Road. Let's be honest, there is nowhere else. It would have to come from Forest Road. If there was an access into this site from Forest Road, I think we would all be looking at this in a much different way, and the relevance of the Waverley roundabout would not actually be so relevant. Okay, so in my opinion, and I would be willing to put a proposal forward, that are we taking both of these in one go, or we're taking them separately? I guess.
No, we're going to take them separately.
Which one are we taking first?
We're going to take the outline planning permission first.
Okay. Well, in regards to the outline planning application, I would suggest that there are significant adverse effects on the local access roads, the amenity of the local residents, and the wider highway network, and in particular, the junction at Priory Road and the Waverley. That reason alone outweighs the persuasion that we have upon us of development. I think we need to find, obviously I'll be looking for someone to second that, but I think we cannot. That's a proposal, yeah. Obviously, there's a proposal for refusal of the outline, and that is because of the significant adverse effects on the local access roads, the amenity of the local residents, and the insufficient capacity of the wider highway network. And in particular, Priory Road, which is the junction of the Waverley roundabout.
I have a seconder from Councillor Churchman.
Chair, can I ask that we have an adjournment correctly, so I can
we're actually getting over, we could have an adjournment for 5 minutes.
Yeah, of course.
Can I just remind everybody that please do not speak to the press during the break or contact, which has happened in the past. Thank you.
Chairman, it's also Chairman, in the past, we've also been advised probably not to discuss amongst ourselves as well. So.
Thank you for pointing that out, Councillor Price. Sorry, are we waiting for?
Are
we all here?
All councillors are here, yes.
Okay, can I call order and can we start again? Mr. Chick wants to just reply to your proposal first. I think it's got some advice for you, so can you, and clarification, right?
Thank you. Yeah, just a few points really. Firstly, one of the issues raised was the impact of the outline on local access roads. One comment I would make is that we have comments from Island Roads. They are our highway authority, that, you know, the highway engineers on behalf of the highway authority. They've assessed the planning application based on the amount of vehicle movements that would occur as a result of the outline. And their view is that the local roads network can be acceptable subject to mitigation, and that would be through these TROs, traffic road orders, which would mitigate issues in the local network near to the houses within Broadwood Lane and Gunville Road and Arthur Moody Drive. So what I would reiterate is that that particular issue of local access roads is one that officers consider is acceptable. Our statutory consultee on that matter considers it to be acceptable. So I would just highlight that objecting to that element of the development, officers consider should be taken with a warning on the basis of that advice that you've got from your statutory consultees. That issue would be controlled with the TROs. Obviously, if the TROs failed, they would be they're covered in the planning application by a non-development condition. So if that failed, the development couldn't proceed. So then the applicant would have to maybe look at something alternatives, but we're looking at what is submitted in front of us right now. The other point I'd make in terms of traffic capacity, and I'm not sure whether the objection at the moment is just related to capacity or other issues, because it wasn't really sort of snookered into that. In terms of the outline alone, because we're taking a recommendation on that at the moment, in the PM peak, it will result in 42 arrivals and 22 departures. So you're looking at those vehicle movements over the course of an hour, not looking at 42 arrivals and 22 departures in a minute. We're looking over an hour. That's disaggregated over that period. So if you imagine those car movements over that hourly period, that needs to be taken account when you're speaking of congestion, particularly onto Gunville Road. In terms of the Waverley roundabout, that is one issue that Island Roads have raised. Officers have made a balanced judgment on that. Councillors can come to a different conclusion, but what I would highlight is that relates to one arm of that roundabout in the PM peak. So it's really defined that objection to one period of the day, which has to be balanced up against that this site delivers, in terms of the outline, 113 houses, considering that the council hasn't delivered on its housing target. So that is something, and I don't know, just say it's the risk of a planning inspector and an appeal, but that is something that an appeal inspector will be balancing, looking at what is that objection, how much weight should be given to it. You know, it's one arm of the Waverley roundabout at a certain period of the day versus 113 houses in a local authority area where delivery has been 54% for 3 years. So, and in a sustainable location surrounded by existing houses on a site that's immediately adjacent to settlement boundary. And so it would be considered sustainable even if we weren't in the presumption, but we are. So they are the points I would make. I think it needs to be vocalised exactly what the concerns are, which policies they relate to as well, because the policies weren't referenced. And I think we need those bits of certainty to start to think about what the reason for refusal would actually look like in practice, and then what would be considered potentially as an appeal if the developer chose to do that. The other thing I would also highlight is that we heard from the developer's agent that they are prepared to make a contribution to a potential mitigating factor, which would be Taylor Road. Now, that may not be the magic bullet, as you say, but they are willing to think about that and to negotiate with officers over a contribution to that. And as Mr. Bolter said, that is something that the Planning Authority has been talking about with developers, but also the council as well as Highway Authority. And I think those things need to be put into the kind of mixing bowl when you're balancing up what the actual ultimate decision would be for the outline section of the site.
Councillor Price, you wish to reply to that?
Yeah, I think I stand by what I've said, really. You know, do I have the relevant policy that relates to that? I think I'd look to the officers for some help on that, actually. But, you know, you can't, I've made the, I took a decision once to vote against the Highway Authority's advice, and I voted for an application, and that still haunts me now that I voted for that, because I actually think we should be always listening to what our local Highway Authority tells us. When it comes to small developments, there's a bit of wiggle, we understand that, but when it's something as significant as this, and you know, we've got good quality highways advice, we should be taking that advice. And of course, the other elephant in the room with this application is because you've only got one road in and out of a development that already exists, so you've got access through that development to a site where potentially there could be 149 houses built, and all the infrastructure required to do it. That is actually the site entrance. You've got to have all the machinery, workers. The calculations don't add up when you just take that into consideration. So I would say this site isn't completely inappropriate for development, but the access is entirely inappropriate for development. And if we were looking at this site with a different access, it would be a completely different story. And I do not believe, and I certainly can't take the concern that this could be lost at appeal, because I would think any decent appeal officer would look at this site and say, well, is that the only road in and out of it? That's not, surely that's not wide enough to take all of these extra vehicles and vehicle movements and construction traffic and everything else. And also, you know, when we're looking at sites sometimes where we're being told a site isn't sustainable because it's, you know, 20 metres away from the next pavement, but we're saying this site is sustainable because it's got a pavement all the way round to the next bus stop. That's how one of the reasons we're calling this site sustainable. I'm not even going down to sustainability, but I'm sure there's other things we could hook on this. It is the access, and I stand by my proposal that this has significant adverse effects on the local access roads, the amenity of the local residents, and the wider highway network, in particular Priory Road and the whole of the Waverley Junction. It's not just one road to it. We experienced it at the quietest time of day last week, when the roads were relatively quiet. And anyone that lives in Carisbrooke or Gunville has a different experience from 8 till 9:15 and from 2 o'clock to about 3:30. That's not even including the second rush hour of the day. So I call into question some of the calculations that we've been sort of given here. And I don't feel that the presumption in favour of development means that we should just allow this development to go ahead without question or without saying that the highways, the wider highway issues and the access isn't entirely inadequate.
Are you, Councillor Price, therefore referring to the whole island report on the outline planning permission, which is recommending refusal within your proposal? Yes? Mm-hmm. Okay. So do you want to, what I get from the proposal is that using the Island report, Island Roads report, and the additions that have been raised by Councillor Price, right? That access and the road issues and traffic things as raised by Island Roads is the basis of his proposal for refusal. Yep.
Chair, can I ask Councillor Quirk has been indicated 5 minutes? I'm sorry.
Councillor Quirk, do you wish to speak against the
I just want to speak.
proposal?
I want to speak about the motion.
Okay.
Because I'm sort of for and against. I mean, we clearly need more homes on the island. I'm not a denier of the fact that we require homes, and they're for people who actually live here now. I agree with Jeff that we need more affordable homes. Our difference is he's had more rented and I've had more of them shared ownership, but we agree that we need them. The site itself is not a bad site, but we're missing something in our core strategy, because we're identifying sites like this that are suitable to be developed, but we're not actually putting any roads in there to get to them. And that's a real failing. There's no point saying you can build on this site if it's going to cause all sorts of traffic problems because you haven't got the road infrastructure. We need to actually build into our forward thinking, Paul, the road infrastructure. I think this is a reasonable site to develop, but not accessing it the way that the proposal is to access. And I actually agree and support the resolution, because I think closing down the Waverley roundabout for an hour every day gridlocked is actually not an acceptable price to pay for having the extra homes.
Thank you. Councillor Brodie.
And I tend to support what Councillor Quirk has said. I think that affordable housing is something that we desperately need. I don't believe that £150,000 houses are affordable. I've already said that. But I think there's a significant access by the highway issue here. Now, at the beginning of this meeting, we had a very emotive discussion about an application at this committee last month in Ryde. And I would just invite every member of this council, of this committee, sorry, to consider whether we would have approved that application if every vehicle had to go in via Hope Road. It didn't. There were numerous access points, and it was, perhaps controversially approved. And yet with this application, obviously not as big, but again, we're seeking to put everything through a very narrow road into what I think is, the site is absolutely fine, personally, but it's the access issue. When I look at the map up there, we haven't had great maps to date, and I will make that comment. There's almost an argument, to say that the house at the western end of Broadwood Lane, if the developer could buy that house and knock it down, it would probably make it a lot easier to get into this site. But if you look at it, there's a house right at the end, which is almost like a ransom strip in some ways, isn't it? However, I'm not suggesting that should happen, and we haven't got that before us. But the way that when you go around there, and not only did I do the site visit, I cycled around there the week before. I had a look at all the access points. I looked at parking on a weekend. That's when I was there, which was twice the levels of parking that we saw on the site visit on a quiet Friday morning in the school holidays. So I am inclining towards supporting Councillor Price's proposal here. It tends to go against the grain with me, but then I'd perhaps have been more convinced if we were talking about real affordable housing rather than what this government seems to deem is affordable housing, which I just refute absolutely. Thank you, Chair.
Do I have any other points? Sorry, Russell, do you want to come back? Sorry. Do we have it? Sorry, come back, Russell. Okay. Is anyone else wants to say anything? We do have a proposer and a seconder of that. Russell?
Yes, so I mean, from what we're hearing, members have clearly considered the balancing issues. You've vocalised the issues about housing. You've noted that. You've considered the issues with the highway and have reached a conclusion that the development is ultimately unacceptable because of that. I would reference the policies that should be relevant to any reason for refusal, and I can read you out what they say. So the island plan obviously has the strategic policies at the start. They start with the SP, and that says that development proposals should not negatively impact on the island's strategic road network, nor on the capacity of lower level roads to support the proposed development. If negative impacts are identified, appropriate mitigation measures are expected. Now, obviously what members have seen is that you don't consider the mitigation measures to be acceptable in terms of the local roads, and you've also considered the issues with the Waverley roundabout. So I think ultimately that would be one of the policies to reference in the reason for refusal, which would be SB7, and the other one would be DM2, our sort of catch-all policy on design, which says about providing attractive, functional, accessible and safe and adaptable built environments. So that they would be the most relevant policies officers would consider for a reason for refusal for the outline that related to the capacity of the network. I would ask that perhaps the residential amenity issue is just amplified a little bit more so we can understand what the reason for refusal to say about that. But clearly we understand the issue in terms of congestion that you've verbalised in respect of traffic.
So Price, would you take on board what
yeah, have to take
include those points that have just been made by
yeah, thank you to the officer for pointing out the policies. I think DM2 is definitely one of the right policies. I wonder if that we should add in the concerns about the whole construction phase, if this had been approved, how that would affect the local amenity and the local neighbourhood overall, because you'd be talking probably a 3 to 4 year construction access through this residential area, whereas a lot of sites are accessed via new access roads or whatever. So I wonder if there's something we could put in there. And also something that most of us remarked is, especially the Newport members, is that, you know, the nearest sort of public open space that is really accessible for the public is actually either Victoria Rec, Parkhurst Forest, or Clatterford Recreation Ground, two of which we look after at Newport and Carisbrooke Community Council. But they're quite a long way away. And again, this development didn't even offer us anything other than a few landscaping buffers and some empty ponds. It didn't offer us anything else either. Or, sorry, the local residents anything else either. Thank you.
So we have a proposal from Councillor Price. Seconded, do you agree, but with the changes the suggestions by Mr. Chick? Yep. That. I think we should go to a vote.
Sorry, Chair, can I just ask, are we all clear that we have a clear reason for refusal here?
Can we read back have we got note of what? Do you wish to?
At the moment,
do you wish to, Councillor Price, read out your proposal?
Do you want me to specifically refer to DM2 and SP7?
Yeah, I think that was the suggestion.
Sorry, I think Russell just wants to come in, if that's okay, Chair.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I mean, I think officers have heard enough of what your concerns are. It might be helpful if we just take a couple of minutes to actually write out what we think the reason is in terms of the traffic impacts. Because in terms of residential, I mean, it's clear that you've got concerns about construction, traffic, so heavy vehicles moving up through that rather constrained network. We can certainly put together a reason for refusal and planning speak, which I can read out, and then you can let us know if that actually does articulate the concerns that you've got.
Would you like us to come up to discuss that?
I'm going to, sorry, no, Councillor Churchman, we need to vote for an extension because we're getting very close to 7 o'clock. And then I suggest that we then have an adjournment so that Councillor Price can talk to Mr. Chick, right, in that. So I need a proposer and seconder for an extension.
I have to propose that we extend the meeting for, it's going to have to be an hour, I think, isn't it?
I would think it has to be an hour, yes. An hour, seconded. Can I have a show of hands to agree to the extension? 4. Is there any against? Any abstentions? 1. We'll now have a quick adjournment so that we can just check the wording of the refusal. Thank you. we've got to move to the second one after this one. All right. Mr. Chick, Russell, can you read out the reasons for refusal?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, so what we've cobbled together is the proposed development by reason of vehicle movements, both during the construction and operational phases, would result in significantly adverse effects on the capacity of the local highway network, particularly in relation to Broadwood Lane, Forest Hills, Arthur Moody Drive, and the junction from Gunville Road, and the wider highway network, and in particular Priory Road and the Waverley roundabout. The construction traffic would also compromise the residential amenity of surrounding properties. The development would therefore be contrary to policies SP7 and DM2 of the Island Plan Core Strategy.
Are you happy with that, Councillor
Yes,
Price?
thank you, Chairman, and thank you to the
Councillor
officers.
Churchman? That. I suggest that we then go for a vote on that proposal for refusal. Those
for one quick point, if I can. Okay. It is for outline only. This particular vote is outline only for those reasons that have been identified, Chairman. Thank you.
It's the particular application 1901-410 out. So an outline proposal. Can we have a named vote as well? Those for the proposal to refuse.
Yes, to refuse.
To refuse.
Councillor Brodie, Councillor Churchman, Councillor Critchison, Councillor Downer, Councillor Price, Councillor Oliver, Councillor Quirk, and Councillor Lilly.
Those against?
None. Councillor Beston.
The motion is.
Councillor Drew.
Sorry, the proposal is refused. Councillor Drew, did you abstain?
On the basis that I wasn't at the site visit, yes.
No, Councillor Drew was not actually at the site visit, so he can't vote or comment tonight. Okay. So thank you. On to the second application of the, is it 39 houses? Let's check.
Yes.
36 dwellings in total. We've obviously had questions on both sites and obviously the presentation. Is there any members that wish to go? I would suggest we go straight into the debate that you wish to propose or discuss this proposal. Councillor Quirk.
As I said before, we do need new homes on the island, particularly affordable homes. This one will provide new homes and affordable homes. The highway constraints don't apply to this element of the site, and I would propose that we accept this element.
Do I have a seconder to Councillor Quirk? Okay, I have a seconder, Councillor Brodie. Does anyone wish to speak in regard or against that? Councillor Price.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm not going to repeat myself from what I've said before, but I would offer an alternative proposal or two in exactly the same vein as I've just proposed on the last application, because but I think what would be useful with this is just understanding that without the TROs in place, this development couldn't take place anyway. Am I right in saying that? Yeah, no.
Yes.
So I think it would be, I think it's a bit pointless for us to take a vote on a site like this that can't be developed if the TROs aren't in place. Now, the TROs could be problematic because the Highway Authority is going to have to look at how it displaces those vehicles that park there overnight and other times of the day. There's going to be a wide consultation with that. And I think we need to either in some way defer this until the TROs are in place so we can make a final judgment on it. Or I would like to put a proposal forward for refusal at this stage.
And just a matter of fact, unless you've got the application, i.e. it's been consented, you can't therefore necessarily go for the TROs. So they tend to actually go in line in conditions or conditions to the applications. Is that correct?
Sorry, Chairman, I was in a different place.
I was asking for clarification. Councillor Price was putting forward the perspective that you would do the TRO first to see if you had that, then the application. But we don't. The normal process is that you actually have the consent with the conditions, the TRO being one of them. Is that correct?
Yes, that's right. Yes. And I can confirm that the TRO is still needed for the junction of Gunville Road and Broadwood Lane, even for this section of development, as well as that section that the officer described for the actual site, going up into the site.
Mr. Gard.
Thank you, Chairman. A brief point for me, if I can. We do at the moment have a proposal with a seconder to approve the Court of Officer recommendation. The proposal which has been put by Councillor Price isn't an amendment to that proposal because it's entirely the difference. Exactly, it's a new motion. So what I was going to propose is that we take the proposal that's on the floor first, which is to approve the Court of Officer recommendation. If people don't like that, they should vote against that proposal, and then we move on to Councillor Price's motion to refuse if that falls. But that would mean that if you wanted to refuse the permission, you should vote against the proposal. Councillor Brodie wants to come in.
Councillor Brodie, and then Councillor Church.
Yes, it's unfortunate really that we haven't got them the other way around, to be honest. I've seconded Councillor Quirk's proposal because I think it's worthy of consideration, but I'm not absolutely convinced by it, to be honest. And I probably won't vote for it because I do think we need to look at the refusal proposal as well for primarily the same reasons as the original one, to be honest. Yes, this is a smaller application. Yes, it provides, in inverted commas, affordable housing, 13 units in this case. But there are still issues around the highway access, the construction traffic accessing it, and they will still have implications on a smaller scale on the Gunville Road junction and on the wider highway network. So I still think there are issues around it, but I'm happy to, as I said, I was happy to second Councillor Quirk's proposal, because I think it's worthy of consideration.
If I can just, Chairman, one quick point.
Yes, okay.
It's a point, Councillor Brodie, that I don't doubt that you know, but you can withdraw your second date. Yeah, okay.
Councillor Churchman.
Yes, I support Councillor Price because we are still not solving the highway traffic problems, and the thought of all that construction traffic trying to access, to build those houses just appalls me. I'm assuming it would take 2 to 3, well, a minimum of 2 years to build those houses. And I'm sorry, but I'm thinking of the people who live down there. And as I said, the access just is not acceptable. Thank you, Chair.
Can I ask the public that it's not helpful at the moment? Okay, is there anyone I'm being advised that we actually go for a vote on the proposal that is for the. Huh?
Point from Councillor Churchman. Sorry, just very quickly, thank you. And just to pick up on the point that you've made there, Councillor Churchman, I think it's probably right that members would be aware from our experience of dealing with developers and monitoring development and the delivery of sites. All the information that we have would indicate that a developer of this sort of scale would expect to build out around 50 units on a site in a year. So I think that's important just to bear in mind when you consider the potential construction impacts.
So, sorry, sir, can you? The public are not here to comment or speak, please. I will ask you to leave if you don't actually be quiet. Okay, thank you. Can we go to the vote? We have a proposal to for approval based on the recommendations by the officer's report from Councillor Quirk. We have a seconder from Councillor Brodie. Can I have a vote for those in favour of the full application for the 30, just the 36 houses or dwellings?
1, 2, 3.
Those against?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
I'm going to, obviously, that has been refused. We need to then go to a vote for refusal. So Councillor Price, do you wish to put forward a proposal?
Yeah, I think the proposal might need a little bit of work, but I think essentially it's going to mirror pretty much what we've already put forward at the last vote. But I think we ought to just adjourn for a minute or two just to make sure that we've got I can get the wording right, if that's okay.
Can I just go, can it be a quick 5 minutes?
It won't be any longer than a couple of minutes, I think.
So we actually get the wording. Thank you. I adjourn for a maximum of 5 minutes. Sorry, Councillor Oliver.
Sorry, before we adjourn, can I just add in about the displacement of existing parking spaces and that, which needs to be put into the refusal scenario?
I suggest that you.
Yeah. Yep.
Okay. Councillor Churchman, please can we get back to our seats? Thank you. All right. Okay. Councillor. Has he got wording for Councillor Price?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, not wording, just some comments first on potential reason for refusal from hearing the debate. Just a couple of comments from officers. So, firstly, the reason for refusal that has just been voted on for the outline didn't include anything about parking, loss of parking from existing residents. Now, that development was for 113 houses. The full element is for 36. And so I would be concerned if that was introduced as a reason for this scheme, given that it wasn't for one that's larger that you've just taken a vote on. And I'd be concerned to the point of, even if an inspector agreed with the reason for refusal, they may still well issue costs on that parking issue because it wasn't referred to before. It's a bit confusing, but I hope you can see what I mean. The other sort of elephant in the room, if you like, is the Waverley roundabout and Priory Road. In that, for the 36, Island Roads haven't objected on that basis. Their objection is not for Waverley roundabout for the full application. And so you would be going against Island Road's advice and taking into account the fact that Waverley Junction would be going above its capacity in 2025 anyway, even if this one wasn't here. It's a difficult one to reconcile with the consultees not objecting to that issue for the arm of the Waverley roundabout, and that's something that needs to be balanced up, I think, as well. In addition, the reason for refusal for the outline included the impact of construction traffic on residents, but as you've heard, a development of this nature may be developed within a year, maybe 18 months. And you need to balance up whether that period of time is so unacceptable that it should feed in to the objection for this, which is more generally about the impact of congestion in Forest Hills, Arthurmead Drive and Broadwood Lane, and that junction of Gunville Road. So hopefully that's helpful, and I can put together some wording if this is something that is voted on.
Price.
Sorry, I think Island Roads.
Only that Russell asked me a question earlier and I gave you the wrong answer. When looking through Alan's report, the TROs for the full is just for the site access at Forest Hills and Arthurmead Drive, not for the Gunville Road junction. Okay.
Councillor Price.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I think I totally understand the parking was very much part of the debate, but is something that we didn't actually put into the wording of the refusal. But I think it still would be looked at as relevant. But I would think it's unreasonable to put it in there. I think we must keep the construction element in there because to start a site and finish a site with the best will in the world, you are not going to build that many houses and be out of that site with no mess in a year. It just isn't going to be possible. So I think the keeping the reason for refusal in line with what we've already said in regards to construction, I think is important, because a lot of the debate has been about these two sites when one enables the other, really, doesn't it? Let's face it. You couldn't build the out without the in, without the full. Sorry. It's I think sort of making sure that the wording for refusal works in both ways is important. But I appreciate that the wider highways infrastructure issues maybe haven't been brought up by Island Roads on the full, and I think we should probably leave the parking for another discussion, but not as part of this wording for the refusal. Thank you.
For the
Yeah, I think on that basis, I think Russell's got the wording to read out for us, if that's okay.
You read out the wording, Russell?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, so taking what I've just heard, it would be the proposed development by reason of vehicle movements, both during the construction and operational phases, would result in significantly adverse effects on the capacity of the local highway network, particularly in relation to Broadwood Lane, Forest Hills, Arthur Moody Drive, and a junction from Gunville Road. Construction traffic would also compromise the residential amenity of surrounding properties. The development would therefore be contrary to policies SP7 and DM2 of the Island Plan Core Strategy.
Do I have a seconder for? Are you happy with that? I just want to actually make my own comments. But I would, I did vote against this, but I voted for the refusal of the first site because I actually felt that there was clear evidence from the Island Roads report, and I felt that that could be defendable, right, if this went to appeal. But I voted for the smaller house because I felt that that was more questionable with it, and that's why I made that decision. So I will be voting still against this proposal of the refusal, but I just wish to explain my reasons. Thank you. It's a named vote. Those for the refusal.
Councillor Brodie, Councillor Churchman, Councillor Critchison, Councillor Downer, Councillor Price, Councillor Oliver. That's it.
And those against the refusal.
Councillor Beston, Councillor Quirk and Councillor Lilly.
Thank you. It is refused, so both of those are refused. We will now move on to the other items, so we're going to have a few minutes, a couple of minutes for people to move. Thank you for coming. And thank you for your patience, Mr. Quigley and Mr. Nicholson.
Thank you all very much.
To extend the meeting for now.
No.
No, because you can take it again.
Do we then need to potentially vote for a further extension?
Okay, can we?
Mr. Chairman, can we just have just a minute here? What's your current? We're just trying to find.
Well, if we get on with it.
Well, I'm not confident. On evidence, I'm not confident that we will get through to.
We'll work on it. We'll work on it. Yeah.
We'll work on it. We've obviously restricted on time. I'm sure we don't really want to extend again. So if we can move on to this application, if I could ask Russell, could you actually start on this one, and could we move it quickly?
No objection from me. Thank you, Chair. So the application site is located to the south of Northwood on the western side of Newport Road, that leads from Newport to Northwood, at the point of the cursor now, so I will put on the laser. There we go. So at the point of cursor now, you can see the application site outlined in red and the remainder of the site outlined in blue, which is in the control of the applicant. This is just an aerial shot of the application site, showing it in relation to the existing houses on the eastern side of Newport Road and the property just above it, which is number 403, a detached bungalow. The application is in in outline, completely in outline, with no matters for consideration at this stage. So all matters are reserved. The layout, therefore, is an indication of how the 4 properties could be laid out. The information confirms that the houses would be 2-storey in height, with a maximum needed level of 5.5 metres, 7.2 metres to the 7.2 metres or 9 metres to the ridge. Just zooming through then, just to show the site surroundings. At the point of the cursor at the moment is the access to number 403 Newport Road, and the photograph below is showing the point of the current site access and the tree next to it. Then a longer shot looking towards the application site here. A shot looking in a southerly direction towards Newport. You can see the tree there. And just some images of the application site there, which council has visited. And then another view looking to the west towards the buffer zone, which is allocated for badgers. And then just a slightly zoomed in version showing the tree protection areas here of the trees to the north of the site. And then showing the proposed site there in plan form. And then some photographs of the existing properties in the area, which are a mixture of 2-storey and bungalows, as you can see there. And then a photograph showing number 403 Newport Road, which is quite well screened from the site by the trees that align the north boundary. And then some photographs looking back towards the site. This area here has permission, an outline, permission for 66 units, which I'll show you in plan form here. This is an indicative layout of the site for 66. And then finally, what is pertinent to the site is an appeal decision recently for refusal. This appeal allowed 2 houses in the location here, just opposite to the site, south of existing properties in Newport Road. And the reasons for that being allowed are outlined in the officer report. So the application is recommended for outline permission, Chair.
Thank you. We have 2 speakers. Mr. Quigley, would you like to start your 6 minutes from now?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I'll try not to keep you all too long. I'd just like to take this opportunity to outline the benefits of the development from our perspective and the iterative design process we've gone through to reach the current layout as submitted, touching on some of the points from the planning officer's report. Whilst it is noted that the site falls outside of the settlement boundary and could be considered a ribbon development, the site was assessed as part of the Isle of Wight Council's 5-year land supply update and was considered deliverable under the Strategic Housing Landability Assessment, where the SHLA deemed it was capable of delivering up to 10 units.
Chair, I can't hear Mr. Quigley.
Is that better? Would anyone like to repeat anything?
I think the issue is that you're reading and
I'm covering it.
You're reading is in front of the speaker.
Can we start again? Thank you.
Sure. So just again, outlining that we like to explain the iterative design process we've gone through to reach the current layout and touching on some of the points from the planning officer's report. Whilst it's noted that the site falls outside of the settlement boundary and could be considered ribbon development, the site was assessed as part of the Isle of Wight Council's 5-year land supply update and was considered to be deliverable under the Strategic Housing Land Availability Assessment, where the SHLA deemed the site capable of delivering up to 10 units. Our own assessments and subsequent review of the site constraints, given consideration to the green belt between Northwood and Newport, has concluded that 4 units would be a more acceptable level of development and be deliverable. In order to retain the open and semi-rural setting of the area, we have laid the site out in a complementary linear orientation with building lines following the set parameters given by existing neighbouring properties, so not extending the perceived built environment. This offers a setback from the road frontage and an opportunity to retain and enhance the established headline along the carriageway. It is worth noting that both the tree survey and the council's tree officer have concluded that the tree that would need removing along the carriageway is in current poor repair and would likely need to be taken down soon anyway. The recent successful application of the successful appeal of the 2 detached dwellings on the opposite side of the road would see the existing street scene extend further into the green belt between the 2 towns than our own development would, however was considered to have little implication on the green space by the planning inspectorate and was considered acceptable. Following third-party ecological and tree reports, we revised and optimised the site layout with the loss of one number housing unit in order to maintain and preserve the constraints. Whilst we acknowledge objection from the Badger Trust, the independent badger surveys carried out by Eagle Eye have identified a main badger set to the northeast of the site, with a subsidiary set being in close proximity to the development. Following additional survey work and assessment, the consultant has confirmed that the closure of the subsidiary set could be carried out in accordance with Natural England guidelines and would not adversely impact on the active badger population. Furthermore, the introduction of a natural buffer zone to the north and west of the site would allow for movement of wildlife outside of the private amenity of the proposed units. The loss of one unit towards the north of the site has served to protect the established tree line between the site and number 403, with measures to be put in place to further protect this high amenity value tree line throughout any potential works. The planning officer's report highlights that the housing delivery in the island has fallen below projected target, and as such, the housing need does not need to be proven under this application. With that said, our client has had conversations with local agents, and a demand for detached properties of this scale in this location would have a high demand in the current housing market. It is also worth noting that the site would be delivering predominantly 3-bedroom units, which is the highest percentage of demand as identified in the housing needs assessment. We do recognise concern from the local member over the small scale of development offering significant impact on the overall housing delivery figures. However, with a strong transport infrastructure already in place, the site could be delivered in a much shorter timescale than that of a larger development, offering housing to the market in the shorter term. The client has also agreed to enter in Section 106 agreements to make financial contributions towards affordable housing delivery elsewhere on the island, together with the requisite solar protection area mitigation payments. The proposed development has demonstrated that concerns from local authority highways have been addressed, as well as those of the council's ecology and tree officers, with mitigation being put in place and secured via condition. We now feel that proposals reflect a viable and deliverable development opportunity. It is hoped that this committee has had a chance to reflect on the pros and recommendations of the planning officer's report and are willing to consider the approval of proposals as an acceptable and deliverable scheme. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Paragraph 6.6 of the report references paragraphs 77 and 78 of the NPPF and states that decisions should be responsive to local circumstances and support housing development that reflects local needs. Does any member of this committee really consider that this application satisfies those tests? Northwood already has recent permissions for more than our share. 66 houses next to Oxford Street, 28 off of Harry Cheek Gardens. Why is it necessary to permit another 3 to 4 bedroom units on an unspoilt location onto a busy arterial highway? A location of ancient grassland where this imposition would wreck an unspoilt natural landscape and interrupt historic views that stretch right out to Totland. Your site visit would have shown you an open nature to this area and surrounding countryside. Why should this important amenity in Northwood be so irreparably damaged by the proposed unnecessary development? Further, the planning report seeks to justify acceptance by saying that it would be in line with the other east side of Northwood Road. I've never heard of this argument before. Is this a new planning policy? Any further development in this area clearly blurs that distinction and disregards the unique historic character of Northwood, one of the island's oldest settlements, and in its distinctive central core and 5 historic satellite hamlet communities as identified in our place plan. Do members really believe the suggestion that local amenities would be accessed on foot or public transport, that people would not drive instead? I've walked this road many times in campaigning, and it takes longer than officers suggest, apart from being unpleasant for its fumes and dangerous to cross. Neither would I ever risk cycling this road. Then there is the inconsistency. Only a few hundred metres towards Newport, advice on a recent, more modest application was quite contrary to the advice now given for this site, with a site with far greater impact. It was then stated, by reason of its location, the proposal would result in the development of accommodation within an isolated and unsustainable location with limited access by means by any other means other than private car. As a result, the proposal would be contrary to the principles of sustainable development. Furthermore, the proposed position directly adjacent to a fast and busy road is likely to result in an incompatible relationship by virtue of the noise and that would be created, and this would be further compromised the proposed use, contrary to the MPPF. To now suggest that the impact on traffic on this development would be insignificant is inconsistent and unrealistic. Newport Road, as I'm sure anyone who uses it appreciates, is fragile in that it takes so very little to cause an obstruction that quickly leads to gridlock and the consequential overloading of diversionary routes such as Pallants Road, where there is no pavement for the vast majority of its length, is already a prominent focus for safety concerns for residents and visitors. In our place plan, there is a section setting out the views of residents on a number of issues. These include references to high volumes of traffic on busy roads, cost of bus transport, expensive, cheaper to go by car, too many houses planned for this area, lack of accommodation for young people. The housing that planning wants to force on us is not what the local community wants or needs. Greenfield space should be preserved, etc., etc. This proposed development does absolutely nothing to benefit Northwood, in fact would adversely affect it, nor is it in accordance with the requirements of the MPPF or our outdated policies. I therefore, on behalf of Northwood and its people, urge you to refuse this application. Thank you very much, members.
Thank you. Do members have questions?
Officers will know that I'm not a great fan of river development anywhere. And this is just another case outside of the building boundaries. Was any consideration given to putting buildings in there more in line with our need? This seems to be underdevelopment of a site. These are prime houses to be sold to someone retiring from the mainland, but not of any use to young islanders setting up home. I would have loved to have seen 4 blocks of 4 one-bedroom maisonettes that would really be a need and would contribute to affordable housing.
Mr. Chick, and then I'll come to you, Councillor Churchman.
Thank you, Chair. Well, my only response is that members, you need to, councillors, you need to consider this application as submitted. It is submitted for 4 houses. It's in outline. Yes, the site is larger. There is a blue line section of the site, so members can obviously consider whether that area of the site could be developed as well. But obviously, this proposal in front of us is for 4. And that's what needs to be considered at this time.
But I believe they had pre-app.
Do they have pre-app?
Sorry, I can't answer that. If they did, I'm not aware of it, I'm afraid.
Councillor Churchman.
Yes, I am correct in saying, am I not, that it is outside the settlement boundary? It is.
Mr. Chick?
According to the comments from the local parish council. Secondly, why do we want to build houses like that? I can't actually believe that we're looking at it in one respect. That is going to do nothing for the island. For all we know, they could end up as 4 second homes, or they could end up with attracting retirees to the island. And basically, this does nothing for our island population. We don't need any more houses like this. And I understand from reading the notes that Northwood have already reached the number of houses that the parish consider they need to build, if I remember correctly. So I'm afraid I will not vote for it, Chairman. Thank you.
Councillor Price.
Thank you, Chairman. The bus stop that is just outside the property, it seems like a wasted opportunity to not put some kind of reserve for pedestrians to wait for the bus on that bank. The bus stop is actually on a little bank just on the edge of that site. I think there was a picture that showed the bus stop. Could that be considered as a condition? But first of all, and again, Councillor Nicholson's just demonstrated how a member should address the planning committee when they're representing their residents. That was textbook, John Nicholson. I would be concerned. I understand that we could refuse this on underdevelopment of the site. That is a valid reason for refusal and would be in line with our policies. But on the other hand, if we did build affordable houses, or we looked at an application for affordable houses, it would probably be unlikely to be supported on a higher number by Island Roads without more significant highway improvement to the junction. I mean, that is a unpleasant road, was well put, because we were stood there, we couldn't hear the planning officer speak, we couldn't hear each other, we had a hell of a job crossing and so on. That maybe was telling me to shut up. But also when you look at sustainability of that site, if we were looking, which I know we're not, if we were looking at more units on that site that was addressing the affordable housing element, it would not be a safe route to school, would it? That's for certain. So, you know, you couldn't expect children to walk to school from there, which would make the location not sustainable for that type of housing, I would say. So I think if we're looking to refuse it, we need to make sure that we've got those things fully considered. Thank you.
Any other questions?
Just following Councillor Price's comments there. Highway considerations, I believe it's encompassed in part of that. So perhaps could I ask if Alan from Island Roads could comment on that, please? Thank you.
Yeah, with the junction, obviously with that speed of road, it comes under the design manual for roads and bridges. So again, this is why, if we made a history of it, it was relocated further along the road so that it could obtain the 101 metres visibility that it requires. Previously, it didn't retain that and it was refused, or recommended for refusal. They obviously relocated the junction so it can now obtain the required level of visibility it needs for that speed of road. Those are the regulations. You know, the faster the road, the more distance it needs to see. And the design manual for roads and bridges stipulates that 101 metres is required, which they've achieved. With regard to traffic numbers, obviously we're talking about 4 dwellings. So on that road, it was not of a significant number to warrant a refusal. So.
Any other points?
I would like to make a proposal that we refuse the application on the grounds of access off the highway. There is no pavement that side of the road anyway, but I think to add access onto the highway, it's just, to me, something we do not need, and it's probably not a planning concern, but it's, to me, unnecessary housing. Why don't we go and build 4 houses on the top of Culver Down is, you know, to me, how I put it. But certainly on our highways.
I don't think that's a material objection, but obviously the access could be with.
And also, it's outside the settlement boundary.
Can I put to Councillor sorry, to the officer, Ollie Bolter. Russell, can you answer this?
Yeah, I'll provide some advice, and then obviously if Ollie Bolter wants to, he can come in. In terms of the access, we have Island Roads Advice, which says that the means of access is safe. And it is a proposal for 4 houses. I would struggle to see how a highway safety related reason for refusal would fly on this site, given it's a proposal for 4 houses. Given that the junction that is proposed includes the necessary visibility displays of 101 metres. And in terms of capacity, given that this road is a very busy road, and for capacity to be an issue, there has to be an uplift of a certain amount, I think it's 5%. And this development of 4 houses would never meet that on a road that is this busy. It would have to be hundreds of houses to meet that 5%. So I would warn strongly against that. In terms of the housing need, we're in a presumption in favour of development. There is a need for housing across the whole of the Isle of Wight. Not just Northwood, not just Cowes, across the whole of the Isle of Wight. The site is not within the settlement boundary. I can zoom through to the island plan map and just confirm that. Wants to exit. So our site is around here, but this black line here is the key regeneration area boundary. And what the island plan says is that most housing will be located within settlement boundaries of the key regeneration areas. The application site is adjacent to existing housing, and that is something that cannot be ignored. There is existing housing opposite to the site. Officers do consider the site is sustainable. It's about a 4-minute walk up to the facilities in Northwood. There is a very regular bus route outside of the site, and therefore it is considered to be sustainable. Coming back to the housing need, there was a comment about the type of housing proposed. This application is completely outlined. It doesn't propose a certain type of housing. The information confirms that it's likely to provide a mix of 3 and 4 bedroom housing. The information that supports the island plan relating to housing confirms that there is a need for 1, 2, 3 and 4 bed houses in this area. The mix is 5% for 1 bed, 40% for 2, 42% for 3 beds and 14% for 4 beds. So there is an obvious need for those types of housing, and that mix of housing would be confirmed at reserved matter stage if this development was approved. But at the moment, it is an outline. You're looking at the principle. You're not looking at a type of housing. It's saying that it's going to be 2-storey housing, which, given what is opposite, is likely to fit in with the character of the area. So that would be my advice on those particular issues that have been focalised at the moment.
I'll bring in Mr. Bolter shortly, but I just want to make a comment to just point out to members that applications in that area have gone to appeal, right? And have been granted I think on a number of sites, or 2 sites on that road. So I think it's important for members to consider that there has to be strong reasons to object that can be sustainable within that. So I will be asking members to put forward sustainable reasons if they wish to or incline towards refusal within that. Mr. Bolter might have some suggestions in that aspect.
Thank you, Chair. If I can just first pick up on a point that Councillor Churchman has made, or a question rather, and you asked whether it was within the settlement boundary. As we can see from the slide, it is not. However, it would still be deemed to be immediately adjacent to the settlement boundary and therefore compliant with policy SP1 in terms of locational sense. However, as we've already discussed in terms of other applications this evening, we do have some out-of-date policies that aren't relevant, or we have to think very carefully about the weight that we give them in our decision making. And I think for me, the question then actually for the for you all to consider is this in a sustainable location, regardless of whether it is immediately adjacent, within or outside a settlement boundary. What I can also do is just pick up on another point that I can't remember who it has made, so apologies for that.
Councillor Quirk.
Councillor Quirk, thank you. And that, which was the issue of underdevelopment. Now, I would make councillors aware, if they weren't aware already, that that is a legitimate planning reason for refusal, and indeed it is a reason that we have used several times over in the past. And should members be minded to consider that as a route, then you would also potentially have the opportunity to allow for further consideration and more detailed consideration of some of the highway issues that you've been mentioning as well. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I'm conscious of the time.
I don't think Councillor Churchman's resolution was seconded, so can I make a resolution that we reject this on the grounds of underdevelopment?
Would you like to repeat it?
I don't think that your resolution was seconded, so it's not on the floor at present. I'm suggesting a resolution that we refuse permission based on underdevelopment of the site.
Have a second for that. We're actually happy with that wording. I'm going to go straight to the vote because I'm conscious of time. Those for. Okay. Would you like to actually, Councillor Quirk, wish to put? Can you click your?
I resolve that we refuse planning permission based on underdevelopment of the site.
Councillor Brodie, Councillor Beston, Councillor Churchman, Councillor Critchison, Councillor Downer, Councillor Oliver, Councillor Price, Councillor Quirk and Councillor Lilly.
Thank you. We've now actually got 3 minutes. I'll go straight on to members' questions. I believe we had one member's question. Is it possible, Councillor Drew, that you'll accept a written answer?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, I will then actually close the meeting.